Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Luffy fanfics, back with the fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Luffy, Ace, and Sabo raised and trained by Whitebeard. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Whitebeard laughed at that. That's my boys, stealing from pirates on their own already. Ace and Sabo grinned at the man, feeling proud of themselves. You're lucky it was Akagami and not any other pirates, Marco said. Come on Yoi. Marco, Thatch called out from the hallway. Whitebeard had sent him to see what was taking Marco and the kids so long. In the bath, was the muffled reply. Thatch opened the door to the bath area, only to double over in laughter at the scene. Ace was scrubbing Sabo's back, while Marco scrubbed Ace's. What had the 4th Division commander laughing was Marco drenched with his clothes on and sitting on Luffy, who was cocooned in a towel, squirming to get out. Could you hear Yoi? Marco said tiredly, as he grabbed the Luffy cocoon and tossed him at Thatch. You deal with him. What happened? Thatch asked as he caught the boy. He kept one hand on the boy's head to keep him from running and picked up a dress that filled him with pride. It was just a simple blue dress, one that they had gotten from Fishman Island, but on the front was a huge Whitebeard symbol that was hard to miss. 3 new fruit users Yoi. 1 idiot. Marco gave a pointed glare at Luffy as he continued to wash Ace's back, jumped in the tub after I told him he couldn't use it, nearly drowned Yoi. Then 2 more idiots jumped in to save him. The tub is small enough that they could splash around but still deep enough for them to drown in Yoi. So you got drenched while trying to save them from drowning in the tub. Nice, Thatch laughed. You picked this. He held out Luffy's clothes. Today's a day to celebrate, right? What better way than to show it off Yoi? Marco grinned. Picked these guys' clothes too. He pointed to the other piles of clothes. Thatch picked up the shirts and admired the large Whitebeard symbol also on them. Come on, Pipsqueak. Let's go to the beach, and you can tell us how you boys got fruit abilities while we wait for your brothers. Make sure there are plenty barrels of water too Yoi. Marco shouted through the door. Do I want to know why? Thatch asked Luffy, who held his hand as they walked down the plank. Ace and Sabo on fire, Luffy giggled. Is that so? Thatch grinned. Once they reached the beach, many of the other crew members ran over and cheered about the boy's new ability and asked multiple questions all at once. Someone overheard Marco telling Whitebeard about it, and it spread from there. But the sound of a voice many of them recognized had them all turn their heads to look at the owner of the voice. Now, this is a party. What are we celebrating? The red-haired captain cheered as he and his crew walked out of the forest. We steal his dessert. Luffy pointed. It was yucky. Thatch's dessert better. The boy crossed his arms cutely. We ate it all because we don't waste food. He nodded his head sagely. Thatch picked the boy up in a hug. Awa, thanks little bro. I bet it did taste nasty. I remember Jazu complaining about it for days after he ate his. Marco and the other 2 boys had joined them by then. Men, Shanks said to his crew. These are the kids that stole our fruits. He pointed to the kids in question. Instead of a fight or the yells Ace and Sabo were expecting, they all laughed. I can't believe we were robbed by kids. They got us good. I told you that one of us shouldn't have been drinking and should have been on lookout. You should have volunteered then. No way. I like drinking too much. They're really not mad at us. Ace looked at them in wonder. Like I said, Marco shook his head. Akagami is very laid back and an idiot Yoi. Now that everyone is here, Whitebeard said, twinkling eyes on his men. Happy birthday, brats. All of Whitebeard's men yelled. The kids looked confused. But it's not any of our birthdays, Sabo said, his voice drowned by the party making. No, but it's been exactly 1 year since you've joined Yoi, Marco said beside them. It's like being reborn Yoi, right? That's why we're celebrating this day, rather than your real birthdays. Yeah, Ace said softly with a smile, it is like we were reborn. Like a new lease on life. Sabo grinned. What's with the kids, Whitebeard? Shanks asked in concern as the party got started. Didn't think you'd let some kids on your ship. Isn't that dangerous? It's even more dangerous to leave them at some random island. Whitebeard took a swig from his mug. Don't worry, those kids are able to hold up on their own. I believe it. I didn't even sense their presence until they'd already eaten the fruits. Shanks rubbed his head in shame. But still, Emperor or not, I think it's too dangerous for kids that young to be sailing on a pirate ship, especially one that practically lives in New World. Whitebeard laughed. The taste from the fruit must have startled them. They were raised to hunt at a young age. I'm not surprised they know how to hide their presence. They both looked over at the commotion just to their right to see Ace and Sabo drenched. Sorry, they both said dejectedly. There was no question as to what had happened if the scorch marks and burnt food around them meant anything. They all laughed at the boys. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll get the hang of it soon, a Whitebeard pirate said. Luffy, who had been grabbed by Marco to keep him from being burnt, laughed the hardest. Those boys have been through so much. It's good to see them laugh, Whitebeard said softly with a warm smile. Isn't it so? Shanks hummed thoughtfully. eyeing the cheerful little girl in Marco's arms. Cute kids. I like them. Why don't you get to know them better? Whitebeard suggested. I think I will. Shanks got up to walk over to where Marco and the kids sat off to the side, just a little away from the rest of the group but still close enough for them to converse with everyone. Marco said it was so Ace and Sabo didn't accidentally burn anyone. Shanks sat himself down right in front of the kid's large plate of food, next to Ace and Luffy, who was now sitting in Marco's lap. Hey, kids. Ace and Sabo stopped their fight over a piece of meat and looked at the man. Once they realized who it was, both of them sprouted flames from their shoulders to the top of their head. Whoa, calm down. Shanks held both hands up in surrender. Sorry, they both mumbled, while Marco shook his head and Luffy laughed. We're still getting used to this, Sabo said as he gave up the meat to Ace and grabbed another piece to eat. Thatch already yelled at us about wasting his food. Ace waved his hand at the pile of soggy, burnt, inedible food off to the side. You're still on fire, Yoi, Marco pointed out. Then tell us how to shut it off. Ace growled in frustration at the man. You're fire too, aren't you? I'm a phoenix, Yoi. I don't go around burning things like you can. He let one of his fingers turn into blue, gold flames and poked Luffy. See, upon seeing Luffy being poked by the flame, they both accidentally burned the plate of food in front of them. Aw, I'm still eating, Luffy whined, as the boys got drenched once again with a bucket of water. Stop wasting food. Thatch yelled over the laughing man who put out the fire. We just took a bath too, Sabo complained. You boys take too many baths as is, laughed one of the crew members in charge of putting out random fires. You try going without a bath for 5 years. Ace grumbled soft enough that only Sabo and Marco heard. Marco scrunched his face in disgust at that. The water's clean, Yoi. You could probably dry yourself off somehow. Try thinking warm thoughts. Warm, not hot, Yoi, he warned them. Ace and Sabo closed their eyes and concentrated and opened them back up when they felt their clothes were dry enough. We did it. They cheered as their plate was replaced with another. That's nice, Thatch smiled, but then said teasingly, try not to overcook the food anymore. He then walked away to join the rest of the cooks in preparing more food. It's not like we do it on purpose. Ace sighed tiredly as he turned his piece of meat over, inspecting it before taking a bite. We can stay on this island as long as it takes for you boys to get the hang of it. I'm sure no one wants you to accidentally burn the ship down, Yoi, Marco said. Pops won't mind. We're in no hurry to get anywhere, Yoi. At least we don't have to worry about Luffy causing the ship any damage. They watched as Luffy reached over, with his arms stretched longer than they should, to grab more food to stuff his face. The boys made a face at the stretched out arms. That's really disturbing, they both shuddered. Shanks laughed and brought their attention back to him. This is great. That's your punishment for stealing from me. He held his hands back up when Ace and Sabo glared at him. Careful there. You just might make Thatch mad. Besides, I heard today's both of your birthdays. Lighten up. So you boys are twins, huh? The two older boys gave the man a confused look. We're not twins. You're brothers, aren't you? You sure act like twins, the man grinned. You do act like twins. You both say the same things and even act the same, Yoi, Marco agreed. We're brothers, but we're not twins, Sabo shrugged. We don't even look the same. Though, how old are you boys then? Shanks asked. 11, they both answered, earning a confused look from the red-haired captain. Okay, I'm confused. Luffy's 8. It's his birthday too, Ace pointed to Luffy. His? Don't you mean her? Luffy's a boy, Marco grinned, as the rest of the men around them laughed. They were clearly enjoying how confused the man was getting. Okay, wait, let me get this straight. You two are not twins, but you're both 11, and you're brothers. And that kid, there, wearing what's clearly a dress, is a boy. And it's his birthday too. The two older boys nodded, and both told him, and he's our search brother. Shanks dropped his head onto his hand. I'm not even drunk yet, and I have a headache. Marco, what the hell have you been doing? First of all, why is one of your kids, a boy, wearing a dress? Ace and Sabo said to let him wear what he wants, Yoi. And why are you letting them tell you how to dress him? Seriously. He needed more beer. He did just that and refilled his mug. They're raising him, Marco said as if stating a well-known fact. Shanks's mug froze before making it to his mouth. What? You're letting kids raise a kid? What the hell kind of parent are you? I know you're a pirate and all, but, I mean, have you not heard of moderation? Hell, how many mothers do they have? This caused all the nearby Whitebeard pirates to roar in laughter. Some even told the ones further away what was so funny. Marco scowled. What makes you think these are mine, Yoi? I was put in charge of watching over them. Marco. Luffy turned his head in an odd angle so that he could look at the man he's sitting on. I want to know what's funny. This idiot thinks I'm yours, Ace's, and Sabo's dad, Yoi, he deadpan. But I already have one. Marco patted the boy's head. You do. This man is stupid. Anyway, how the hell did you come up with that, Yoi? They don't even look anything like me. Shanks waved his free hand this way and that, trying to get his mouth to work. Well, you know, maybe they look like their moms, you never know. You could have shacked up with 2 women at the same time. And these boys were born at the same time, and then another woman later and had that one. Even Whitebeard had to laugh at the image of his straight-laced son with that many women at the same time. What? You're old enough to have a few kids. Shanks defended himself from the evil glare Marco was giving him. Ace, Sabo, you have my permission to test your new powers on him. Wait. Shanks quickly held up his hands at the boy's twin look promising oncoming pain. I'm sorry. I won't even mention it again. Fine, Marco said as the boys backed down, looking disappointed that they'd lost a practice dummy. You know, Haruta grinned, Marco would make a great father. You guys should have seen how he handled little Luffy after his tantrum on Fishman Island. Vista nodded in agreement and mimicked what Marco did for everyone else, which caused everyone else to coo at the image. They're right, you know, Sabo said thoughtfully. You would make a great dad. I wouldn't mind calling you Oyaji. You're a much better parent than mine were. I wouldn't mind either, Ace mumbled as he blushed, looking down at his legs. In a clearer voice he said, and you're good with Luffy and know a lot of things and help us a lot. Pops. Luffy turned around on Marco's lap to give the man a greasy hug. Hey, Marco deadpanned. Whitebeard is our pops. Not me, oi. Grandpops. That doesn't sound too bad. Whitebeard smiled at Luffy's new title for him. He had many sons and daughters, and now he had grandsons to add to his growing family. Besides, he'd been waiting for this day to happen. He'd seen how Marco handled the children and had taken great care of them as if they were his own. Ugh, Pops, don't encourage them, yoy. Marco moaned and buried his face in Luffy's hair, mostly to cover his blush. How did you boys get the same devil fruit powers anyway? Someone asked. I thought there could only be one user per lifetime or something like that. We both ate it, Ace answered. That still doesn't explain much, yoy, Marco said. I'm pretty sure the Marines have done many tests on devil fruits and never has there ever been any two people with the same powers. Both Ace and Sabo shrugged. No idea, we just ate it. Then Luffy suddenly turned to Whitebeard. Grandpops, guess what? He said as he waved his hands in excitement. Ace is super strong. He beat that guy up. Oh, Whitebeard's eyes widened in surprise. You managed to defeat an emperor. He cheated, Shanks said as his face turned red in embarrassment. That was dirty and underhanded. Apparently, Ace headbutted Akagami's family jewels, yoy. There was a roar of laughter with the red-haired pirates being the loudest. So, Luffy was it? Shanks decided it was time for a topic change. Luffy looked up at Shanks in open curiosity. Why are you wearing a dress? You're stuck on the whole dress thing, aren't you? Sabo glared. Luffy jumped from Marco's lap and twirled around. Because it's pretty, the boy said, not at all deterred by the fact that he's a boy. You like? Marco picked it because today's special. Marco sighed. Just so you know, Izo had nothing to do with this, yoy. Oh, he's still wearing pants under it. Ace pulled Luffy's dress up so they could see his shorts. It's not like he thinks he's a girl or anything. He just happens to like dresses. He's really picky, Sabo nodded. He likes them with a little bit of frill but mostly plain. You should have seen the showdown between him and Gramps. Luffy saw a dress he liked. Actually, that was the first time we found out he liked dresses. Anyway, Luffy saw a dress he liked in a window and asked Gramps to buy it for him. We thought Gramps was going to get mad at him for wanting a dress. But instead, Gramps yelled at him that this other much frillier dress was cuter. We ended up stealing Gramps' wallet and buying the dress just to get them to stop arguing. Geez, I knew the man was nuts, but to seriously argue with his grandson over which dress is cuter. Thatch laughed as he joined them. 3 large cakes were brought out as a round of happy birthday was sung. The boy's eyes went wide in surprise. The cakes were just as tall as Thatch. Cake. All 3 shouted and jumped up to go to the cakes. You 3 only get one of those cakes. Leave the rest for us. Thatch yelled at them as they ran to blow out the candles. Those boys sure do eat a lot. Shanks eyed the empty plates. Yup, they're the reason we have to land and restock so often. Thatch laughed. No wonder. Garp was saying the Marines were getting wary since you guys seem to be keeping a closer eye on the islands. Speaking of which, the old Marine seemed to be happier than usual during his last visit. Yeah, Marco leaned back on his hands with a lazy smile. He found out his grandsons were alive and safe. Of course, he's happy, yoy. Grandsons, huh? Shanks looked to the kids with a smile. Good for him. So ... is it just me or is that kid a little slow? What do you mean? Thatch asked as he watched the boys dig into their own cake, not even bothering to bring the cake back to the rest of them. He's 8, right? Isn't he a bit small for his age? And his speech is a little slow for his age. He sounds like he has trouble forming words, like he's tripping on his own tongue or something, the captain mused. Not that I know anything about kids or anything. I could be wrong. Oh, he doesn't trip over his tongue. He trips over rocks, his own feet. And sometimes nothing, Jazu laughed. As if on cue, Luffy stood up to get a piece of the cake from the top layer, only to fall face first into the whole cake, causing everyone there to roar in laughter. It's not like we're not doing anything to help the boys, yoy, Marco said. The kid's speech is improving. He used to only speak 1 or 2 words at a time, yoy. The brat was brought up in an environment where he wasn't allowed regular conversation, Whitebeard said as he took a seat by them with his own huge slice of cake. He only had those two brothers of his. Even then, the time they had to themselves was minimal. Yeah, Kobato and I planned their meals to give them the maximum nutrition, Thatch said. The thought of those three boys being brought up in such a condition where they could barely talk to each other brought a bad taste to Shanks's mouth. He had to get another refill of alcohol just wash it down. Ace and Sabo dragged a giggling Luffy back to the group. Their cake was now a lost cause after the two older boys burned it in their attempt to save Luffy from suffocating on the cake. Wonder what his first words were, Shanks said out of nowhere. Whose? Ace and Sabo asked. Luffy's. Ass, Ace scowled as Sabo laughed. No, it wasn't. He was trying to say ace. It just came out sounding like ass. Oh, Marco grinned. I'm assuming Sabo was his second word yoy. No, it was poo, Ace deadpanned. He said both of those words on the same day. It was Bo, Sabo insisted. The crews laughed at that, while Thatch and Haruto were rolling in the sand, trying to catch their breath. I still think he was trying to tell us he wanted to take a dump, Ace scowled. Abigail Van Buren. The party went on through the rest of the day. Shanks liked how the Whitebeard pirates enjoyed to party as much as crew did. The boys had taken a short nap earlier and were up and about causing trouble again. Shanks really did find them amusing. When the kids decided to take a break from running around, he took a seat next to them on the beach. You boys want to hear some stories? Story? What kind? You tell us about your adventure? Luffy asked excitedly. Sure, or I could tell you some stories about the Pirate King, Shanks grinned, knowing most kids enjoy those stories. Pirate King? Luffy tilted his head. He'd never heard of this before. What? You've never heard of the Pirate King? Shanks faked a shocked expression that wasn't entirely fake. Somewhere deep down, he knew the kid probably didn't know much about the world and how it worked. I used to be his cabin boy. Gul D. Roger was a man I admired and the only captain I'd sail under. We had so many adventures. Gul D. Roger. Luffy's head tilted even further, trying to remember why the name sounded so familiar but couldn't place it. Whitebeard told us some stories about him. Luffy, Sabo said, distracting the boy from remembering or blurting out that Gul D. Roger was Ace's dad. Ace hesitated. I'd like to hear about his adventures, if you don't mind. After finding out that the man he hated for so long actually wasn't a bad person, he'd secretly wait for Whitebeard's stories of the Pirate King. Whitebeard watched them fondly as Shanks told them story after story about the late Pirate King. He could see the excitement on Ace's face, enjoying the stories as much as his brothers. It was a good thing that Akagami had met the boys. Ace could, at least now, know more about his father from someone who knew the man. There was only so much he could tell on his side. Of course, he had come to this island specifically because he knew Shanks would be there. Eventually, some of the older Whitebeard crew members, who had been with him since Roger's time, joined them and added their own stories. The stories continued through dinner. Luffy vibrated with excitement towards the end of the party and suddenly stood up. I got's it. I'm gonna be next Pirate King, he declared. Everyone burst out laughing at the boy. Shanks only gave the boy a look as if he was just another boy with a big dream. And why is that? Short stuff. Because Luffy gave the man a look as if he were stupid. Pirates is free. That mean Pirate King is more freer person in the world. He threw his hands out to show the world. You tell him, kid, someone shouted. Understanding dawned on him once he remembered what he had heard about Garp's grandchildren. And for some unknown reason, Shanks felt that the kid could possibly do it. Even Whitebeard was impressed with the boy's determination. It may be a child's dream, but he knew better. He understood what it was the boy wanted, just as he was sure Shanks did too. He was sure his family wouldn't mind supporting the child's big dream of being the freest man in the world. It wasn't like he was after One Piece anyway. He's happy where he is with his family. He's already living his dream. Even better, he's got himself grandchildren. About a week after the birthday party, Thatch was sent out on a mission with a few men from his division to an island not too far away. Some idiot pirate crew decided to cause some problems in one of Whitebeard's territories. It didn't take long for Thatch to return. I'm back, he called out once his tiny crew of 8 pulled their smaller boat back to shore. Ace and Sabo ran up to greet the man. Thatch looked around before asking where their youngest went when he heard the boy call out his name from the deck of Moby Dick. Luffy held onto the rail as he walked back a few steps and launched himself. Ace and Sabo yelled at him as they scrambled around to catch their brother when he landed. The 3 of them ended up tumbling in the sand. Thatch laughed at the boys. I see you've thought of a new move, Luffy. Yeah, but he needs to work on his landing. The 2 older boys groaned under their giggling brother. Uncle Thatch. Luffy got up to tackle the older man. I missed you too, kid, he ruffled the boy's hair. But Uncle, Pops says to call you that, Luffy said happily, getting up off of his brothers to give the man a hug around his leg. You're back sooner than we thought, Marco said as he walked up to them. 3 days there, 3 days back, and 1 day to get rid of the nuisance. Pathetic. Not sure where they got the crazy idea to try and take over Pop's Island. Oh yeah, Look what I got from them. Thatch reached into his bag and brought out a small box and opened it up to show them. Then he looked at Marco with confusion on his face. Uncle Thatch, a devil's fruit. We seem to be running into a lot of those lately, yoy. Marco looked at the boys with a raised eyebrow. The two older boys flushed in embarrassment. And if they're determined to call me Pops and Pops grandpops, then you, as my brother, are Uncle Thatch, yoy, he said smugly. Oh, come on, the cook whined. I'm too young to be called an uncle. I'm still young enough to be their big brother. He swiped the side of his hair for added effect. Marco raised an eyebrow at that. Okay, maybe not, Thatch deflated. Luffy tugged on Thatch's pants to ask if he was going to eat the fruit. I'm not sure. I'm going to think about it and research what fruit it is first. I'm going to report to Pops now. Thatch left to find their captain, though not before turning around to yell to the kids, and don't call me uncle. I'm the awesome Thatch. Late that night, while most of the two pirate crews were asleep, Luffy woke up and looked around to see what had woken him. He crawled out from under Marco's arm. The man wouldn't let him sleep with his brothers just in case they went up in flames in their sleep. Again, he dusted some sand out of his shorts and looked again. Still not seeing anything. He went on Moby Dick to take a look around and maybe use the toilet. He walked to Thatch's room when he saw the light still on. He'd barely gotten a foot in when he was carelessly pulled off his feet, but he did see Thatch on the floor with a knife buried deep in his back. Uncle Thatch, Luffy yelled out, not even noticing he was being taken out of the room. Luffy continued to yell out to Thatch even as they made it across the deck and down to the same boat the fourth commander had returned in. Jahaha. Good timing, kid. Luffy winced still at the voice. It was a voice he knew. It was the voice of someone he played with often, but it sounded different. Teach, Luffy whimpered. We have to go back. Uncle Thatch is hurt. Luffy, my boy, we are not going back, and Thatch is dead. The man laughed some more. I finally have the devil fruit I've been waiting forever to find. It's now mine, and you are going to help me escape this place. Teach used the rope that tied the small boat to Moby Dick and tied Luffy up so he could free his hands to row the boat. There wasn't enough wind at the moment to help him get away quick enough. Luffy was too shocked to do much. Teach was part of Whitebeard's crew. He was one of their brothers. He was family. The boy didn't understand what was happening. How could Teach leave his brother to bleed out? But he knew, he could feel it. A feeling that he never felt before from his so-called brother, greed, and nothing but greed. Once the shock wore off, Luffy thrashed about to do anything to get away or to get revenge, anything, but he was tied up and had no weapons. He knew he was useless, so he did what he did best, cry as loud as he could. Luffy's yell had woken up most of the sleeping pirates. Many of them, Marco included, ran to Thatch's room, the only place in their vicinity with lights still on, to see what was going on. A doctor, Marco yelled, practically demanded, to the surrounding crew members. We need a doctor right now. Everyone ran around in panic, wanting to know what happened. Ace and Sabo couldn't find Luffy in Thatch's room once almost everyone cleared out to grab one of their many doctors. They were sure it was their youngest that had done all that yelling. Then they heard the boys' struggles and ran to where the noise came from. They looked over the side of the ship and barely saw a smaller ship sailing away in the dark, and they were sure their brother was on it. Luffy, they cried out. Luckily, Shanks had heard and saw Luffy being taken before anyone else and jumped overboard from his own ship, where he had slept. He got there just in time as the boy was being thrown overboard to distract a Sea King that was headed their way. The red-haired captain grabbed the boy just as the Sea King's mouth closed, just barely missing them. It resurfaced to reclaim its meal, and Shanks gave it a glare, sending it away with a blast of haki. Get lost, he growled. The man then sluggishly kicked his legs towards a rowboat coming their way. Once Ben reached them, he dragged them both into the boat. Ben's eyes widened when he saw the state his captain and Luffy were in. They were both drenched in seawater and blood, with Luffy clinging onto his captain and crying. What really caught his eyes was the fact that Shanks was missing an arm. The first mate quickly rowed back to shore. We need a doctor here, Ben yelled out, urgency clear in his voice, before they even reached the shore. More pirates came running to help the man pull the boat up the beach, and two doctors helped carry Shanks and Luffy off the boat. Once they had Shanks on the beach, the doctors quickly worked on the captain to stop the bleeding long enough for him to be carried into the infirmary, where they could do proper work. Izo had to be called over to help get Luffy off of the red-haired captain. Kobato couldn't stand the sight of blood and passed out from seeing so much of it on the two. In order to get Ace and Sabo to stop fretting over their brother, the head doctor pushed them away from the gruesome scene and had them watch over Kobato for him. It took a few tries to get the kid to let go so the older pirate could be taken care of. As soon as he got Luffy off, Izo stripped the boy out of his bloodied clothes to find no wound on the boy. Feeling relieved that he didn't see any visible wound, he was finally able to hand him off to Kobato, who finally woke up so he could take charge in the infirmary. Kobato carried Luffy, who was still crying, a little further up the beach where Whitebeard was. Luffy, it's okay. Everything's okay. Are you hurt anywhere? She tried to calm the boy down. While Izo checked for visible wounds, she felt around to make sure nothing was broken or bruised. Ace, Sabo, and a few other crew members had gathered around them. Kobato let Ace and Sabo take over her position once she was 100% sure Luffy was physically fine and didn't need a trip to the infirmary, hoping they could help calm the poor boy. The two boys sat down with Luffy sobbing over the both of them as they rubbed soothing circles on the crying boy's back. Uncle Thatch, Luffy hiccuped as he continued crying. Uncle Thatch, Shanks, Teach. They waited patiently as the boy continued to cry. Teach, kill Uncle Thatch. Shanks's arm gone, he said in between sobs. Everyone there looked at each other in concern at the boy's words. Teach was one of their oldest members. They all were thinking there was no way Teach would betray them. Uncle Thatch is okay, Luffy, Sabo said. The two older boys didn't notice the looks the men around them had. He's hurt, but the doctors are helping him right now. Shanks, too, Ace added. Uncle Izo is helping them, so they'll both be fine. Luffy calmed down to sniffles after hearing that his uncle and friend would be okay. Tell us what happened, Whitebeard asked softly as he took a seat in the sand with the boys. I woke up cause, I don't know. I see Uncle Thatch's light on, and then Teach take me, and then Teach throw me at Sea King. The Sea King ate Shanks's arm. He wailed loudly at the end at the memory of Shanks's arm being eaten. Why would Teach do that? Someone asked, while another asked, are you sure it's Teach? Teach said wanted Uncle Thatch's fruit. Luffy wailed with his face pressed against Sabo's chest. Whitebeard sighed and tiredly commanded, someone get a head count. Check if anyone is missing. We'll discuss this more in the morning. As the night went on, Sabo slowly leaned into Whitebeard as he fell asleep with Luffy in his arms. Ace had already fallen asleep on Sabo's other side. Kobato had her head on Whitebeard's lap next to Ace. Marco walked up to them with a few blankets to lay out and cover the four of them. He carefully picked up Luffy, now wearing one of Kobato's sweaters, to move him over to Kobato's side and sighed as he gave his report to his father figure. Teach is the only one missing. I just don't understand Yoi. He's been with us for so long. I can't believe he'd betray us like that, Yoi. He spoke softly as to not wake the kids and Kobato. Whitebeard only sighed sadly as he looked up to the pre-dawn sky. He was heartbroken that someone he'd considered to be his son to betray him. Should we go after him, Yoi? No, Whitebeard said after a pause. Leave him be. It's dark, and he's probably long gone. Thatch and Akagami are our first priority. I'm actually surprised that Luffy wasn't able to escape before Teach took him. Marco smoothed the sleeping boy's hair. He was probably just as surprised as we were that it was one of our own that attacked Thatch and was caught off guard. Or Teach is stronger than we all think. Something doesn't feel right about all this. Shanks was the first to be let out of the infirmary just a few days later. Luffy wouldn't leave him alone and tagged along everywhere he went. As soon as he was sure Thatch would live, Shanks was ready to leave the island and resume his sailing, letting his own doctor to finish the healing process. It's time for us to go. We've been here too long as it is, and I'm sure the world's wondering what we've been up to. He gave the kids a wink. Tell your Uncle Thatch when he wakes up that he better be in tip-top shape the next time we meet. Luffy once again cried, not wanting his new friend to leave. Akagami gave him a considering look. He took off his straw hat and looked at it before placing it firmly on the boy's head. The former cabin boy of the Pirate King would love to see what the future held for this child. Don't cry, kid. It's not like we won't see each other again. How about this? You give me my hat back when you've achieved your goal. You want to be the Pirate King, right? In order to be the Pirate King, you have to be strong. This hat is very important to me, so you better return it in good condition. Luffy tilted his head back so he could see the man from the too large hat and gave him a look of wonder before he grinned through his tears. Okay, I'm gonna get strong enough to beat you. I'll be sure to visit when I can. All right, Luffy nodded as he sniffled and wiped his eyes. Make sure to get stronger the next time I see you. Marco grinned and shook his head at those words. If only the other captain knew what the kid was capable of. Once everyone from the Red Hair Pirates left, Marco bent down to give something to Luffy. This is for you, Yoi. He showed the boy a holster with a small hunting knife in place. He helped the boy strap it on his right thigh, so you can protect yourself if you ever find yourself in need of a weapon. As you are right now, you're not strong enough to defend yourself, Yoi. And this one, Marco held up another holster with a small pistol, is from Izo. It took him some time to find something he thought would be suitable for you, Yoi. Luffy nodded. Pops, I want to get more strong enough so I can protect everybody. Marco placed a hand over the boy's hat. He was still uncomfortable with the new title, but the kids wouldn't stop calling him that. His captain seems to enjoy being called Grandpops, though. You're plenty strong already, Yoi. I know, Luffy mumbled, looked down uncomfortably, but I don't want to be strong like that. I want to fight on my own. And even if I'm strong now, I don't know how to fight somebody like Teach. I'm not strong enough. Marco found himself in awe at how much understanding the normally oblivious boy mixed with the deep serious voice the boy used that was so out of place. Marco wondered if this was the same happy-go-lucky child he'd been watching over. The boy had the knowledge to understand that his strange ability of knowing how to use different fighting styles was useless if he didn't have the strength to back it up. It may have gotten him and his brothers this far, but here in New World, it wasn't going to get him far enough. I'll see what I can do to help. Working with your fruit ability is a good start, though. He turned to see Ace and Sabo waiting for Luffy behind him. I got one for you boys too. He handed them their holsters with a knife. My birthday gift to you boys. Divided by. The following days all three boys trained with their ability, while Ace and Sabo also had a few other trainings added to their schedule. They would visit Thatch every day, with Luffy feeling more upset with each visit. Only Ace and Sabo realized that with each day of Thatch not waking, Luffy would get more fidgety and agitated. It was by the third day of Shanks leaving that the boys decided to do something about it. Maybe he needs to vent or something, Sabo mused. He and Ace were practicing on controlling their powers. Marco had them practicing calling forth their power to burn a few branches they gathered earlier. Vent. Ace looked towards where Luffy was stretching his arms and trying to reach a tree branch with Marco supervising him. Yeah, he's probably frustrated that he couldn't help Uncle Thatch and got hauled away by Teach. Sabo glared at the twig in his hand and tossed it to the ground when it wouldn't catch on fire even when he was concentrating. This is harder than I thought. Your hat's on fire. Ace took his stick to poke at the misplaced fire. How are we supposed to let him vent? Attack someone. Let him go all out. Sabo sighed as he flopped himself on the sand and took off his hat to glare at it. The fire extinguished itself quickly when he put his hand on it. It's not hot, and there's no burn mark. He picked up another stick to concentrate on. That's someone, maybe a tree. I did it. He held up his burning branch to Ace. Ace pouted at his brother. That's not fair. Hey, wait, don't you dare poke me with that. He took a step back when Sabo attempted to poke him with the flaming branch. Whitebeard laughed in amusement as Sabo chased Ace. They ran about, yelling at each other, until Ace tripped and fell flat on his face, with Sabo tripping over his fallen form, accidentally stabbing his brother with the burning branch. Whitebeard immediately got up to check on the two. Are you boys okay? He asked as he helped them up. Oh my god, Ace. I'm so sorry. Sabo went to pat his brother's back where he'd stabbed him. I'm okay. Why? Ace looked at his brother in confusion, then to Whitebeard. I thought I stabbed you. The blonde sighed in relief. Whitebeard laughed at them. You boys are made of fire. That little stick disintegrated on impact. An evil grin was on Ace's face soon after hearing that as an idea came to mind. While Sabo's attention was on Whitebeard, Ace picked up a nearby branch and poked his brother's arm with it. Cool, he said as the small area on Sabo's arm turned to flames, burning the branch. The captain watched on as Sabo glared at his brother. Ace continued to push the branch into his brother's arm, watching in fascination as it just continued to burn instead of harming Sabo. Seeing the boys were fine, Whitebeard left them to their fun. So about Luffy, Sabo sighed. Right, Luffy, Ace said thoughtfully. I think got it. Our powers, I mean. He went on to explain what he thought to Sabo. By nightfall, they'd both successfully had fire spouting where they wanted and when they wanted, with a few mishaps. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Divided by. The next morning after breakfast, the two boys dragged Luffy to the nearest tree, instead of going to check on Thatch like they usually would. Attack that tree, Sabo said seriously. Why? Because you look like you need to attack something, Ace said, earning a smack on the head from Sabo. You look like you need to vent. You shouldn't bottle up your frustration. Just let it all out on this tree. Sabo patted said tree. Luffy just looked at the tree, not really understanding what his brothers wanted him to do. Pretend it's Teach. Ace crossed his arms. Luffy scowled at the tree, as he pictured it being the traitor. He was angry with himself for not being able to do anything when he was right there to do so. It was so similar to the time with Ottoheim, but this time, help came in time. Even so, he was still angry. The poor tree had no idea what it did, but it was being attacked by punches and kicks from tiny limbs. What that tree do? Asked a confused First Division member. Pretending to be Teach, both Ace and Sabo answered. We're letting Luffy vent. Sounds like a good idea, yoy. Marco looked at the man for a moment before nodding to himself. Luffy, why don't you pretend this guy is Teach instead? Might save you from splinters. One thing led to another and a few other crew members joined in. Some time before lunch was served, a sword was found in Luffy's hand. No one even bothered to question where the brat learned how to use a sword. They all just assumed their commanders had taught him somewhere during the time he'd started staying with them. Even Haruta and Vista joined to spar with the kid to help him release his distress. Every time the sword got knocked out of his hand, they would wait for him to pick it back up. Marco supervised with Ace and Sabo by his side the entire time. I'm sorry, I didn't realize Luffy needed time to let off some steam sooner. He's smiling now, yoy. He was frustrated about the whole Teach attacking Uncle Thatch thing and that he couldn't do anything about it. Sabo sighed. And Shanks's arm, Ace said. It was just before lunch when Izo called out to them from the ship, stating that Thatch was awake. Luffy stopped what he was doing and ran with his brothers to see Thatch. The hall was crowded, but they all parted for the commanders and the kids. Those were the only ones Izo was allowing to see Thatch right now. Whitebeard was already in the room, smiling happily. Luffy, Thatch called out as soon as he saw the boys, with Luffy in Marco's arm, to prevent the kid from tackling Thatch. Marco set the kid down on the bed for Thatch to hug him. Pops told me what happened. I'm so glad you're okay. Luffy buried his face into the man's chest and sniffled. I thought you were dead. Teach said he killed you. Hey, now, don't cry. Izo said you're the reason I'm still alive. So thank you. Thatch hugged the boy as tight as he could, though he did wince at the pressure. He then patted an empty space on his bed for the other two boys to sit. Why don't you brats tell me what I've missed until the meds kick in and I fall asleep? It took another 2 weeks for Thatch to finally be able to move around without pain, and they set sail again. With Whitebeard's new rule of having a commander with them at all times on New World's islands, the boys were usually accompanied by Marco. There were times when their pops were too busy to go out with them, so the 1st Division commander would find someone available to take them. Divided by. The first time this happened, it was Kingdu who went with the kids. One thing led to another, and all 4 of them came back mudded with scrapes and bruises. Sabo had somehow slipped into a lake. He grabbed Ace's shirt on his way down to save himself, only for the both of them to fall in. Kingdu dove in to save the two, but that left Luffy to wait on the sideline for them to come back. Of course it couldn't be that simple. A deer of all things came charging at the poor boy, causing him to run from the deadly antlers. That was what greeted Kingdu, Ace, and Sabo when they surfaced. Then they had to chase after Luffy, who was later found riding the rampaging deer, having the time of his life, until he was bucked off and into the lake. Divided by. Then there was Rakuyo. He turned his head to look at a weapons shop window for just a second. He swore he only took a glance when Luffy disappeared. Apparently, the boy tripped and fell into a hole that was in the freaking middle of nowhere. Who the hell puts a hole that big where people walk? And how did no one fall into it yet? And of course, Ace and Sabo had to follow their little brother by somehow getting sucked into the hole too. Divided by. Haruto was slightly luckier. He was the only one of the group to come back beaten and battered that time. That was only because Luffy had dragged him, literally dragged him, into a store that had a hat he insisted Ace needs. How did he, a grown man, get dragged by a kid that was barely half his size? Ace, the grown man, first had to trip over one of the other brothers in order to fall to the ground, where it's easier for the munchkin to grab him. Ace was very happy with the hat that was a tad too big for his head. The crew members mentioned this to him, as Haruto was being ignored in the background, and the boy scowled and claimed he'd grow into it soon. Divided by. The luckiest had to be Thatch. A drunk stumbled into Luffy, causing the boy to smash his ice cream onto the man's shirt. The drunkard spewed profanities and threatened to kill the boy until he realized Thatch was reaching for his sword. Recognizing who was chaperoning the kid, the drunk then apologized and begged for forgiveness before running off. That was the first time anyone came back unscathed with the boys, besides Marco. Though Ace and Sabo were grumbling about idiots, drunks, and Luffy having too much ice cream. Divided by. The worst was when Luffy got kidnapped by a small pirate crew, who saw the large Whitebeard mark on the kid's t-shirt. They had hoped to get the kid to tell them what Whitebeard's weakness was to use against him. Vista was so confused as to what had happened. One minute the kid was walking behind him, and the next, he was gone. There wasn't even a peep or a sound of struggle or anything. Vista was so sure that with the kid so close to him, Ace and Sabo, one of them would know if he drifted off on his own or something. He and other 2 brothers searched every place they could. Giving up a couple hours later, they went back to the ship to get help. It wasn't until almost dark that Marco, with Ace and Sabo, found the missing kid. The shack the pirates were holding up and was burnt to the ground with the enemies still in it. The sight of Luffy all bloodied, bruised, and unconscious had Vista wallowing in guilt. Ace and Sabo had been called by Whitebeard with Marco when Luffy finally woke up. The first person he saw was Vista, who had been sitting there the whole time. The first thing the kid says to him was to apologize. What are you apologizing for? Vista nearly cried. I'm the one that should be saying sorry. I'm sorry for letting those guys take you and put you through all that. It's all my fault. I should have kept better watch on you. But I wasn't fast enough to get away, Luffy teared. He was really fast, and he made me sleep when I wasn't even tired. And Vista is sad. Ace and Sabo came crashing in right after that, with Marco pulling them back before they could hurt Luffy anymore with their intent of a bone-crushing hug. But after seeing Luffy bawling his eyes out at the sight of his brothers and claims of having thought of never seeing them again, Marco let them go with the risk of angering Kobato. Everyone was proud of her after she drew up all her courage to fix up the child after nearly fainting from seeing him. She was determined to get over her fears for the boys. This is a pirate ship. If she's not able to pull through, who would bandage them up, she thought to herself. Sure, Izo could easily taken care of them, but adults are different than children. Luckily, Luffy had eaten the Gamu Gamu no Mai, causing his body to be rubber. That had saved his life. There were no broken bones to be fixed. No lasting scars, just a lot of small cuts that were easily bandaged up. It was scary. Ace and Sabo wasn't there when I woke up. There were only people I didn't know there. Luffy wailed. I don't like it. I don't like when I don't see Ace and Sabo. You weren't there with me, and it was scary. That was when it really hits home for Marco that Luffy doesn't remember ever being away from Ace and Sabo. They have always been in his life, never separated. They are all he's known from his very first memory until now. It doesn't matter that the boy now has so many others he could play with and is comfortable with. Ace and Sabo were here with him, and to Luffy, that was all he needs. Divided by. And now, after all 14 commanders had babysat the boys at least once or twice during island visits, they were all congregated in the meeting room, while Marco got the kids ready for another island. They've been in there for the past 10 minutes, making plans. I say we follow them, Haruta suggested. That's not going to work. Thatch shook his head. Marco would know. And Luffy, Izo added. Well, I don't hear any other ideas, Haruta grumbled with his arms crossed. There was a moment of silence as they listened to the sounds of small feet running about on deck and Luffy's cheering. There was a collective sigh in the room as they realized they were running out of time if they wanted answers today. Fine, we follow them, Kingdu grunted. We'll deal with getting caught when it happens. Only Vista, Thatch, Haruta, Kingdu, and Izo had free time. Everyone else had things to do for their division before they set sail again. I can't believe we're acutely stalking Marco, Kingdu moaned as they stood in an alley in an attempt to hide themselves. It wasn't easy as they were a group of eye-catching men. I can't believe I'm going along with this, Izo huffed. I just want to know what Marco does with the kids. Vista rubbed the back of his head. I don't want a repeat of last time I took them out. We need to know how Marco keeps the kids out of trouble. Did anyone think of asking? Izo asked. Blenheim did, Haruta said. Marco told him that he always takes the kids to do some training to tire them out before taking them sightseeing. I heard Juru tried that, and they all came back covered in dirt, twigs, and leaves. Luffy looked happy though. Thatch took a quick look around the corner to see if the group of 4 was at a safe distance for them to continue following. The smile that appeared on his face caused the rest of the commanders to look. They all smiled at the sight of Luffy, who was being carried under one of Marco's arm, was moving his arms and legs in an attempt to do the frog crawl in the air. Ace and Sabo were walking in front of Marco, talking to each other. They followed, keeping their distance, and watched as Marco would stop his group in front of a few bars and walked on instead of going in. The commanders looked at each other in confusion when Marco and the boys finally went in a bar. It was just a bar. It was by far the rowdiest one in town. They could hear the merrymaking from their hiding place, an alley 5 buildings away. They were even more confused when Marco buttoned up his shirt, covering his tattoo. As soon as Marco and the boys went in, the group of commanders made their way to the bar's window to peek through. Divided by. Ace and Sabo ran through the crowd of gruff-looking men and straight to the counter, where they usually sat when they go out with Marco. Seeing his brothers run, Luffy stretched his arms towards the bar, causing everyone there to go silent and stare. Marco, not wanting to be flung across the room with the boy, let go of Luffy. I win. Luffy cheered with his arms up, just as Ace and Sabo scrabbled up the stools on either side of him. And you didn't hit anything this time. Good job. Sabo ruffled the boy's hair. Marco walked up to them and picked Luffy up and let the boy sit on his lap. Beer for me, whatever juice you have for these 2, and milk for this one yoi, he ordered, startling the bartender from his stupor. We don't get food. Luffy turned his head at an odd angle and tilted it up to see Marco's face. Later yoi. Well, what do we have here? A big hairy man approached them and slammed his hand down next to Ace. Don't you know you don't bring kids into a bar full of bandits? Everyone laughed. The bartender returned with their drinks and set them down before quickly backing away, wanting to stay out of any unwanted trouble and pain. Marco smirked at the man. I can bring the kids anywhere I want, yoi. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with them. The bandit laughed. You want me to fight with your kids? You've got to be kidding. Or maybe you're just a wuss who can't handle a fight. Hey, guys, this girly man wants us to fight his kids. I wonder how much that little one with the devil's fruit would go for. The bar erupted in laughter. The laughter stopped suddenly when the hairy man was sent crashing into an unoccupied chair. Pops isn't a wuss, and you can't have Luffy, Ace declared with his fist still in front of him. He then turned to look at Marco with a glare. He started it, and he smells. Marco merely shrugged and turned around, with Luffy still on his lap, to face the rest of the bandits. Ace and Sabo got off their stools to stand in front of them with their fist raised. Same rules as usual. 1,000 bully for each furniture you burn to me, cost of damages to the owner, and if you burn the building down, Luffy sleeps with me for a month. There was barely enough time for the 2 boys to nod in agreement before the bandits surged towards them, and all hell broke loose. Divided by. What the hell is Marco thinking? Thatch nearly screeched. Sounds like he's teaching them to control their firepower, Izo mused, and maybe extorting them. At least he's watching them. Haruto tried to defend their brother as he watched Luffy, still sitting on Marco's lap, send a punch towards a man that was about to swing his sword at them. Marco did nothing to help, not even to dodge. Should we help? Vista asked worriedly. Izo shook his head and pointed at Marco, who was looking right at them, clearly not wanting them to interrupt. I don't think Marco will be happy about that if we did. We'll jump in if it looks like we're needed, which I doubt will happen with Marco there. Is Luffy doing what I think he's doing? Kingdu asked in bewilderment. They all looked back in to see the boy stretching his arms towards various tables, taking the plates of food and putting them on the countertop. Well, at least Marco's looking over them and tossing the ones that don't look good away. Thatch grumbled. What a waste of food. Kingdu patted his brother's back soothingly. It's Marco. The food is probably bad. Have you noticed that Luffy's aim is better? Haruto pointed out. He hasn't missed a single plate of food he was aiming for, and he punched away all the guys that are attacking them. Look, they all paid attention to Luffy stretching his arm back to throw a punch at a guy that nearly took off Sabo's head. Not that it'd work, unless the man knew haki, which it didn't seem like it. The punch itself didn't do much but to distract the man long enough for Sabo to turn around to launch a fiery kick, knocking the man into 2 tables. Looks like the kid still can't handle his recoil, Izo said when Marco had to stop Luffy's arm from knocking them both off their stool. When was the last time anyone trained with the brats, anyway? I think Marco's been training Luffy, along with Ace and Sabo. The 2 older brats been sparring with whoever has spare time. Vista had his eyes closed in thought. I'm pretty sure Marco's supervising those 2. You know, so they don't get out of hand and burn someone or the ship, Thatch said. They gave a low whistle when they saw Ace and Sabo practically fuse together to attack the men behind each other. It was like they switched places. The 2 kids looked at each other in surprise before grinning. Must be a new move. Those 3 sure know how to handle their fruit pretty well for only having them for 2 years, said Kingdu. Seeing as Ace just take down the last bandit and Luffy waving at them, the commanders made their way in. How many chairs did they break, Yoi? They heard Marco ask Luffy. 1, 2, 3. Luffy pointed to each chair as he slowly counted. All of them. Actually, the bar owner started timidly before he was cut off by Marco. How many chairs did you have total, Yoi? There were 25 altogether, but there are a few that are still usable. Okay, if 1 chair is 200 bully, how much would 25 chairs cost, Yoi? 200 bully. My chairs aren't worth that much. Shush, Luffy's thinking, both boys told the bartender. They all watched as Luffy bent over a sheet of paper with a pen in his hand, while still sitting on Marco's lap. Most of the commander's eyebrows rose in confusion as the boy continued to solve the math problem in his barely legible handwriting. 4,532 bully. He answered proudly. How did he get that answer? Thatch whispered to Vista, who just shrugged, just as baffled as his other brothers. Marco, on the other hand, continued on without batting an eye. And how many tables are broken, Yoi? 5, Luffy said after looking around. If 1 table is 300 bully, how much would 5 tables cost, Yoi? Ace and Sabo gave another glare to the bartender before the man could making another protest. 1,968 bully. There was a moment of pause in the commander's head as they processed the numbers. So how much do they owe the owner, Yoi? 7,500 bully. Okay. Marco waved his hand in front of the confused bartender to get his attention. The kids owe you 7,500 bully, Yoi. Will that cover everything? Cover everything? That's too much. I can't take that much from children. The owner protested. Think of the extras as a thank you fee for letting us use your place for training, Yoi. Besides, they're not paying out of their own pocket. Marco gave the man an easy smile as he put Luffy down. And you kids owe me 5,000 bully for the 5 chairs you burned, Yoi. With that, the kids went off to clean the down bandits of their money. Marco, do you know that brat's math is wrong, right? Kingdu pointed out. Marco merely grinned at them. Motivation for the other 2 brats to teach him better, Yoi. Izo crossed his arms and looked at his brother in disapproval. I can't believe you, of all people, would bring those kids into a bar full of bandits. Hands on training, Yoi. Marco waved off his brother's concern. Besides, these kids learn faster with real-life situation than just sparring where they know they're safe, Yoi. Is this how you keep them out of trouble? Thatch asked with wide eyes. Marco nodded. Bring them to trouble, so you know what to expect and hold on to Luffy, or he'll just somehow find trouble you won't be ready for. I had him practice swimming to keep him moving because he wouldn't stay still. Divided by. After getting used to the idea that Whitebeard tends to pick up new family members, Ace and Sabo came up with the idea of pranking new members. Their favorite by far is when the whole ship pretends they weren't there and lets them haunt the ship. Divided by. A few hours after being picked up by the Whitebeard pirates from being stranded at sea, Jacob rubbed his eyes. He could have sworn he saw a kid a few feet away from him just a second ago. He looked again, and the kid was gone. Just to make sure, he asked the older members he was assigned to work with. A kid. They laughed. This is a pirate ship. Why would we have kids? The man just shrugged it off, thinking maybe he was just tired after drifting around without food for so long. Then it happened again. This time he saw a blonde kid. This one was a little older. He blinked and the kid was gone. Not wanting to be laughed at again, he didn't mention it. That is, until it happened a third time during dinner in the galley. I swear it, he said to his new family. There are kids on this ship. At least 3 of them. 1 little one, 2 older ones. I think we should check for stowaways. A heavy hand landed on the man's shoulder. With this many people, there's no way we would miss a stowaway or 3. Maybe you're seeing ghosts. Thatch said in a low, creepy voice, causing everyone to laugh. A shiver crawled up the man's spine as he heard children's laughter along with everyone else's. Jacob was beginning to think he was going crazy by the next day when he saw all 3 of them together in the galley, actually eating breakfast at the tables with the commanders. None of the commanders seemed to notice them, not even when the smallest one stole food off their plates. Do ghosts need to eat? When he was on deck after breakfast, the 3 kids were already there. He could have sworn he left before them, but there they were, running around, chasing each other and everyone not seeing them. Then, all of a sudden, the youngest slipped in between the rails to fall overboard. 2 crew members at the rail where it happened both jumped in after the kid, and Commander Vista, who just happened to standing there, tossed over the rope ladder for them to climb back up. As all this was happening, just about everyone else on the deck rushed towards the cabin. The man turned to his commander. Blamenco, so I'm not going crazy. Those kids are really there. Blamenco smacked his hand on the back of the man's back and laughed. Nah, the kids like to pull pranks on new members. He led the man towards the kids, just as the smallest made it back up with the other crew members. These are Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, all hammers. So if you see one go over, make sure you jump in after them. Otherwise, well, you don't want to know what Marco would do to you. Blamenco laughed once more. I'd tie you and hang you over the side of the ship and leave you there for a few days, yoy. Marco said as he came up to the group with a large towel in hand. Then there was a thundering of footsteps as the rest of the crew who were on deck earlier rushed back with various clothing pieces in hand, all excitedly waving them around for the sopping wet child. They're Marco's, his commander whispered to him, then continued in a louder voice. This happens often. You'll never see a boring day with these kids around. I'll say, Izo said as he came up to them. Luffy's a walking heart attack waiting to happen. He grabbed the nearest article of clothing to hand to Marco, once Luffy's dried. That's a boy, right? Yes, Blamenco answered with a grin. Okay, he's not even going to bother. He's stuck on this ship. Don't get him wrong, he likes it there. But there are kids on a pirate ship. Kids that everyone seemed to be fussing over. Better not question anything more, unless he says something stupid enough to be tossed over. Yes, Whitebeard pirates enjoy seeing new crew members' reaction to meeting the children. Divided by. Just a month before the boy's 11th and 14th birthday, there was an attack on Moby Dick. It just happens that more than half of the crew were gone on various different missions at the time. Not that that was a problem, but the pirate crew that was attacking had them outnumbered in fighters, so the boys decided to help out in fighting the enemies. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy had no problem with their assigned duty of defending the nurses and doctors who were out and about the deck, helping the injured into the infirmary for treatment. They were on separate parts of the ship, taking down anyone who dared to get in their way of retrieving their injured family members. Not everyone in the 16th Division knows how to fight, but they were still fine, since their ship had plenty of other fighters to protect them. Whitebeard didn't care if they could fight or not. All that mattered to him was that they are his children, and he'd keep them safe. Luffy just punched an enemy out of the way for one of the doctors to take a look at someone from the 3rd Division who had been shot in the shoulder, when his hacky told him that someone was aiming for them. He pushed the doctor out of the way. Luffy. The doctor yelled as he watched the boy fall face first onto the deck after the shot was fired. Upon hearing that one name, most of the Whitebeard pirates had stopped fighting to turn their heads towards the call. Even Whitebeard stood up from his seat, where he had been observing the fight. As soon as Ace and Sabo saw the doctor kneeling over Luffy's prone body, they called out an attack, stopping anyone near them from moving. Hatarubai. Their anger acted as fuel as they were able to call out more fireflies than they had been able to during training. They were able to push half of the enemy crew towards the rails of the ship, with Marco helping with the other half. The rest of the Whitebeards stayed out of their way, not wanting to mess with an angry Marco. Looks like they shouldn't mess with an angry Ace or Sabo either. They, Whitebeard included, watched as the enemies backed away in fear from the boys' yellow-green fireflies and Marco's fiery form. Who hurt Luffy? Both Ace and Sabo demanded. There was a moment of silence as no one answered the boys before Marco sent shivers down their spines. Which one of you bastards shot my son Yoy? His voice low and dangerous. He's okay. The doctor cries out in relief before Marco could get an answer. Marco and the boys quickly forgot the enemies as they rushed to Luffy's side. I believe his rubbery body saved him, the doctor told them, the battle long forgotten by both sides. There's only a bruise right here. The bullet must have bounced off him and pushed him down. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo tried to nudge their brother awake. Marco watched in satisfaction as the small chest moved up and down. Ace, Sabo, Luffy slurred as he slowly opened his eyes. Don't do that again. His brothers yelled at him. You scared us. And they engulfed him in a hug. Luffy teared up, feeling the fear and relief from them. I'm sorry, his voice muffled, returning the hug. I didn't have time to do anything. And I didn't know what to do. There were sounds of movement behind them before they heard a rumbling sound and felt the ship shake. Then the next thing they knew, parts of the railing and the enemy pirates were thrown out to sea. Seems some of them had second thoughts about living. Whitebeard commented as he took his seat again. Did you do that, Grandpops? Luffy gave the captain a look of wonderment. That's so cool. Whitebeard looked at the boy in amusement. Yes, I did. I used my devil fruit. I can show you more tomorrow. Right now, I think you and your brothers need to sleep. You boys look tired. Leave the cleaning up for everyone else. Come on, boys. Marco scooped Luffy up in his arms. You're sleeping with me tonight, Yoy. After the four of them disappeared into the cabins, the tension dissipated. I don't think I've ever seen Commander Marco so angry before, someone whispered, but was still loud enough for others to hear. You're telling me, Thatch said, and I've known him since forever. Then he grinned. I wonder if he realizes that he finally accepted those brats as his sons. With the boys now 11 and 14. Their captain deemed the three of them strong enough to take care of themselves in New World without a chaperone. Or at least Ace and Sabo were, but they can easily take care of their youngest. What they don't know is that Marco usually sends someone to tail them just in case something happens. Well, Luffy knows, but Marco made the kid promise to not say anything to his brothers about it. All the crew members have seen how much stronger the two older boys have gotten when they fought alongside them during enemy attacks. Luffy mostly sits on Whitebeard's lap on the sidelines, unless Marco lets him help out. Whitebeard and the commanders didn't want any unwanted people to see Luffy's talent, especially now that he's capable to hold his own after all the training with the commanders. Divided by. Currently, the boys were roaming around a small town on a random island they landed at to restock. With them growing as much as they have been, the crew had been restocking more than they used to. Thatch and Kobato, at least, were happy with how much they've grown, though they were still worried about Luffy not being as tall as most boys his age. Ace and Sabo's old clothes at his age were still a bit big on him. They entered a clothing store to buy some new clothes. Ace eyed Luffy in one of his old outfits. It made the boy look even smaller. The shorts were obviously being held up by a belt and went well past his knees, almost like a capri, and the short-sleeved shirt had to be bunched up in the back and tied off so it wouldn't get in his way. They had wanted to buy something that would fit better, but Luffy had insisted that he was fine with their old clothes. Besides, he likes having a tail. Luffy turned to tug on Sabo, who was standing next to the boy, looking at something on a shelf. We're being followed. That had Ace's attention. He took his purchase and joined his brothers, who, Luffy shook his head, indicating he didn't know. There's two, though. Kinda strong but not really. Sabo looked outside, just giving it a cursory glance as he thought. He didn't see anyone out of the ordinary. We shouldn't cause too much trouble for the people here. They might be following out of curiosity. Remember that one guy that followed us because he wanted to join the crew? They remember that. The man had followed them because he saw them leaving Moby Dick and followed them, hoping for a chance to ask them if he could join. This was at the last island. They beat the man up because he seemed suspicious and caused such a commotion that the people there were afraid to talk to them afterward. Thatch laughed at the poor man when he came to see what was going on. Too bad for him. Whitebeard didn't take him because the kids didn't like him. It was more like Ace and Sabo didn't like him because the man was trying to be sneaky, and they didn't want him near Luffy. Could be that. Let's just see what happens. But if they want to fight, we'll be ready. Ace and Luffy nodded, and they left the store to wander the town a little more. They followed Luffy around, going in and out of stores that caught his interest. Ops, Luffy said sheepishly as he turned around to his brothers. He'd accidentally led them down a deserted alley with a dead end. The dead-end alley wasn't long. It was long and dark enough that they didn't realize it was a dead end until it was too late. It was also short enough that they were caught off guard when two people all of a sudden ran towards them. There wasn't enough time to defend themselves when Ace and Luffy were handcuffed together. Damn it, Ace cursed as he felt himself growing weaker. He fell to his hands and knees and saw how his youngest brother dropped face down right next to him. Luffy, Sabo, Luffy said weakly as he lifted his head and reached his free arm out in front of him. Ace looked up in time to see them cuff Sabo as well and took off with him. Ace yelled out Sabo's name. He pushed himself up and tried to help Luffy, only for them to fall back down. Not knowing what else to do and with only the thought of saving Sabo on his mind, Ace crawled his way towards the alley entrance, dragging Luffy along with him. Ace, Luffy. Ace looked up to see West at the mouth of the alley looking down at them with worry. What happened? Where's Sabo? West is screwed. He knows he's screwed. Marco is going to kill him. all because he took his eyes off the kids for a few minutes. Sabo, Luffy whimpered. People came and took Sabo. We have to go get him back, Ace said, still crawling. Okay, but first, we have to take care of you guys. West picked them both up and carried Luffy in his arm while Ace was tossed over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, facing forward. What is this thing? Ace shook his left hand, jingling the chains. I feel like mush, probably sea stone. It takes away your devil fruit's power, West explained. It's supposed to make you feel like you've been dumped in the sea, sapping your strength. Can you tell which way they went? Luffy nodded at Ace's question. Good, keep track. We're getting Sabo back as soon as we get this thing off. Marco, West called out once their ship was in view. They saw Marco walking up to the rails to look for them before he transformed his arms to wings to get to them faster. What happened? He asked once he took in the handcuff and the lack of Sabo. Get these things off us right now, Ace demanded, kicking his legs weakly. Pops, they took Sabo, Luffy whined weakly from West's arm. Seastone Yoi, Marco asked, knowing that if it were just regular cuffs, Ace would be able to break them off easily. The boys nodded anyway. Get on the ship. Becky is still on board. He can get those off for you, Yoi. Hurry, we have to get Sabo back, Ace demanded, practically whining. Ignoring Ace's urge to go faster, West relayed what the boys had told him to Marco. Those guys were well prepared, Yoi. They must have known about your fruit abilities beforehand. Otherwise, why would they use sea stone? Those things are too expensive to just use normally, Marco pointed out. They could be dangerous, Yoi. According to Luffy, they're not strong. We were just caught off guard, Ace huffed. They cheated. Should I round up everyone? Becky asked as soon as he got the cuffs off the kids. Marco had to hold them by the back of their shirts to keep them from running off to save Sabo themselves. It should be fine, Marco said. I'll go with them. I'll give you a call if we need backup, Yoi. Which way? He transformed into a phoenix, grabbed the boys, and flew in the direction Luffy pointed. There's lots of them now. In there. Luffy pointed to a small marine base below them. The Marines. Marco's eyes narrowed. What would the Marines want with Sabo, Yoi? Ace shrugged as Marco landed right next to a solid brick wall where there were less guards. Who knows? Maybe his parents finally got fed up and decided to pay the government to get him back. Makes sense, Yoi, Marco mused. Wait here. I'll go get him. Wait. Ace pulled the man back by the arm before he could transform again. We'll go. I already told that stupid dad of his to leave Sabo alone. He didn't listen, so we'll make sure he listens this time. Ace gave him an evil grin. Fine, but if I think you need help, I'm coming in, Yoi. No worries. Ace brought up his flaming fist. We'll make sure you won't even have to lift a finger. Both he and Marco frowned at how small his flames were and how it flickered unsteadily. Hurry up. Let's go, Luffy urged them, not noticing what was wrong. It might be because you and Sabo share fruit powers. It should be fine after you get the sea stone off of him, Yoi, Marco said. Don't worry. I'll keep an eye out on you boys. Okay, Ace nodded. He had originally wanted to punch a hole in the wall, but with how his fire is acting, he decided against it. Instead, he used Luffy to rocket them up and over the wall. Marco stood nearby, listening as he heard a few shouts. He then decided to take flight in order to keep an eye on the kids in case he needed to step in. He was cautious to fly high enough so the enemies wouldn't notice him but low enough to keep an eye on the boys. As soon as Ace and Luffy were over the wall, they took down the few men that were under them and ran towards the building where they were sure held their brother. After taking a few more men on their way, Luffy pointed out one of the men that had attacked them in the alley. Ace didn't recognize him now that the man was in the usually marine uniform, rather than street clothes. The man saw them and ran in the opposite direction, only to be stopped by a sword being pointed at his neck and a dagger by the smaller boy sitting on his shoulders. Sabo's keys. Now, Ace hissed from in front of the man, as Luffy glared at everyone else to back off from his higher position. Not wanting his head lopped off, the Marine quickly complied and led them to the room where they put all their keys, begging other Marines they run into to let them pass. After getting the keys, the man took them to the prison cell that held their brother. Sabo, Luffy cheered once they made it. He jumped off the man, who fell to the ground from the force of the jump on his back. Ace kept an eye on the Marine quivering in the corner as Luffy opened the cell door and very carefully, very slowly, unlocked the sea stone on Sabo. It had taken a few tries before Luffy was able to unlock the cuffs without touching it and draining his energy. He wouldn't let Ace help him, insisting that he could do it himself and that he'd save Sabo. That feels so much better. Sabo stretched his body then picked up his top hat off the ground. Me too, Ace said. Apparently, if just one of us touches sea stone, it'll affect the other one too. That's interesting, Sabo said. Now that they were free, Sabo gave Ace a grin, and they lit their fists on fire, causing the poor Marine hostage to cry out in fear. Ace, yeah, this place sucks. I think we should burn it down. That's a great idea. Oh, how about our signature? You know, Luffy's drawing. Oh, I like that idea. Maybe that bastard who thinks he's my father will finally leave me alone. Sabo grinned even wider. They both turned their grin to the poor man on the floor. You picked the wrong people to piss off, they both said as Luffy laughed behind his brothers. Ace took out a marker he had in his pocket and doodled on the man's face. There, make sure you tell that bastard that Sabo belongs to us, not him. Lots of people coming, Luffy told them as he giggled at the sight of the Marine quivering in fear with Ace hovering right over his face. As soon as Ace finished, he and Sabo turned to face the oncoming group of Marines and gave them an eerie grin before unleashing a Heiken right at them. Ace then grabbed Luffy, and the three of them ran right through the inferno. They are going to teach Outlook 3 to never go after Sabo again by crushing this Marine base. If that doesn't work, maybe asking their pops to fly them to Dawn will. One way or another, Ace is determined to free Sabo from his parents. Marco flew around in circles, pacing in the sky, as he waited and waited and waited. It's only been a few minutes, but waiting and not knowing how his kids were doing was aggravating. After 10 minutes, he was done waiting. Sure, he trusts them to be able to take care of themselves, so he's not going to barge into the base to look for them. Instead, he's going to unleash his aggravation on the Marines for taking his kid. He landed right behind a group of Marines who were rushing into the base to fight and kicked the nearest one, alerting the rest of his presence. When the kids finally came out of the building, they found Marco shaking the life out of a Marine with his phoenix talons and wings flapping, keeping him airborne. ... and tell that asshole that Sabo is my kid, not his, and the next time anyone tries to kidnap any one of my kids again, I'm to tear them limb by limb, he lectured before tossing the Marine to a pile of bodies next to him. Ace and Sabo stopped a few feet of Marco, each holding a mop. Somehow, Ace wasn't as surprised as he thought he'd be that Marco had left a message for the stupid noble before he could. Pops, Pops. Luffy ran over to give the man a hug, splashing paint he was carrying all over the man's shirt. Look, we got Sabo's back. Marco eyed the blonde boy and was relieved to find no injury. He gave the blonde boy a smile. Good to have you back. Glad to be back. Sabo smiled widely back. Perfidi oi. He nodded to where Ace was smearing paint that Luffy was carrying with a mop onto a wall. Our symbol, Sabo said. It's our initials, and the wings represents our freedom. Remembering what Luffy had told him about birds having freedom to go where they wanted the one time the boy asked him to take him fly, Marco nodded in approval. It was a simple drawing of a wing on each side of their initials, ASL. Very symbolic, he thought. Luffy thought of the design, Ace said as he finished up his art. Though his drawing was a mess, Ace refined it. We thought about using it as our signature. Sabo grinned with his arms behind his head. Didn't think we'd be using it this soon, though. Marco shook his head at the boys and laughed as the two older boys went on to paint more of their symbol around the base. So, they slowly walked back to their ship. There was no hurry. Most of the Marines were already too injured to move or dead. Any that were too scared of the children and hid during the kids' tour of the base would be too busy tending to the dead and injured, also putting out the fires they caused. Sabo shrugged. That bastard father of mine offered the Marines a nice sum if I were to be returned home unharmed. That's what Ace thought, Yoi. Marco nodded. I did overhear that someone tipped them off about where I've been and stuff. Hence the sea stone, I guess. Sabo shrugged. I'm worried about the tipper, Marco said after a brief pause. We should let Pops know. Who knows what this person knows and how much they've told the Marines, Yoi. When they returned, most of the crew were already back on the ship, standing on deck with weapons drawn. The crew gave a loud cheer when the four of them were seen. Becky and West had went out to gather as many of their siblings as they could so they'd be ready to attack if needed. Later that night, Marco found himself in his captain's room. What's wrong, son? Whitebeard asked at the worried look on the first commander's face. He motioned for his son to sit on the bed next to him. I'm beginning to think there's something wrong with me. Pops, Yoi. Marco sighed into his hands. Have you gone to see your brother? Marco huffed and crossed his arms as he remembers Izo's smirk and his dismissive wave. Yeah, he told me to talk to you about it, Yoi. He continued at Whitebeard's raised eyebrow. Every time I see the kids in danger, I get this urge to kill everyone and anyone that gets in my way of saving them, Yoi. This overprotectiveness is wrong, and I don't know what to do about it. It's to the point where I almost want to keep them in my sight at all time. I can't do that though. They're growing boys who are definitely strong enough to take care of themselves, Yoi. I mean, they did just take down a Marine base today. They were lucky there were only low-level Marines, nothing higher than the one captain there. Would you believe those brats took their time running around an enemy base? Why couldn't they just get Sabo and come right back out? Instead, they just leave me out there, worrying about them because I have no idea what was going on in there, and I didn't want them to think that I didn't trust them enough to take care. Whitebeard paused as he let the information sink before he laughed loudly, interrupting his son's rant. There is nothing wrong with what you're feeling, son. That is perfectly normal for a parent. And yes, you are now a parent. There is no denying it. I feel the same way about you and your siblings. There are days that I want to keep the ship in paradise or in one of the blues, where it's much safer, but if I did that, no one would be happy. You have to learn to not be too overprotective. It's hard, but don't worry, you'll figure this out. Divided by. A few weeks after the whole Sabo kidnapping event, Garp paid the Whitebeard crew a visit. He was led by Marco to their training room, where he watched his grandson duel with their youngest commander, Haruta, if he remembered correctly. He watched as the boy took up a stance with 2 swords, which were smaller than normal to fit his size. He recognized the stance as Vista's. Practice Yoi, Marco explained. He needs someone who'd be able to keep up with him in his different fighting style. He did insist that he wants to just fight with only his devil fruit's power, but I think it'd be best to keep training him with everything else as a precaution. Yoi. He's getting to the point where he can switch styles flawlessly and make them his own. Luffy's eyes wandered over to catch his grandpa's before the boy was forced to pay attention to his opponent again. Garp straightened his eyes to his other 2 grandsons standing up in the stand. They haven't noticed him yet, it seemed. Marco let them continue for a few more minutes before calling for them to stop and gathered the boys and all the commanders to the meeting room. Luffy ran up to give his grandpa a hug that was returned. Ace and Sabo greeted him with their usual shitty gramps and a grin. It was all per usual. He didn't mind, but that didn't stop his fist of love though. What's brought you here today, Garp? Whitebeard asked once the door closed. Teach, Garp answered. Well that, and to check up on his grandsons after he heard what had happened to Sabo. He provided the government information about your crew in exchange for a seat as a Shichibukai. I don't know what information he gave though. The commanders started talking all at once to each other, pondering what the traitor was planning. Whitebeard held up a hand to quiet them and gestured for the Marine to continue. No idea what he's planning, especially since he has no bounty. The government wasn't even aware of him until then. He accused me of being a pirate's informant of all things. Could you believe that? Garp laughed. Of course they have no proof or reason to doubt the great Marine hero. Sengoku isn't stupid enough to believe a pirate, but I've been put on temporary leave. I mentioned going back home to East Blue, and lo and behold, the bastard learned about some shitty noble looking for his son. He looked at Sabo. I'm surprised he's just now making his move, Yoi, Marco said. He was probably biding his time and gathering supporters. He now has a crew. They call themselves Blackbeard Pirates. Garp scoffed. Because of all this, I won't be able to offer you any more information until things cools down. The bastard even told them my grandsons has joined your crew. Good old Sengoku. He told Teach that wasn't possible since my grandsons disappeared years ago. He gave another loud laugh before worry took over his face. Teach doesn't know too much about the boys, Whitebeard offered when Garp looked to Luffy in worry. Only those in this room knows their story. Teach was already long gone before Luffy made it known to the rest of the crew of his skills. Even still, they don't know anything past that they were once slaves. That's as much as Teach knows. Garp nodded in understanding. He knelt to give each of the boys a hug before leaving, knowing that Whitebeard would keep his grandsons safe. Months later, they once again docked near an island with a bustling town on the other side. Everyone gathered their things and disembarked to set up for another party on the beach, away from the population. The 3 boys were the first to run off towards the forest that separated them from the town when they were given the okay. Their game of tag somehow turned into a game hide and seek. The whole forest was their hiding place. Ace concentrated his haki to try and find his brothers. They never let Luffy be it. They knew they wouldn't be able to hide from their brother for long. The boy's observation haki was always on, and he didn't know how to turn it off to make the game even. He and Sabo didn't understand how Luffy was still able to find them when they suppressed their presence. Luffy's only explanation was that Ace is Ace, and Sabo is Sabo. He always knows where they are. It was only them that it worked on. When they tested it out with a few other commanders, Luffy couldn't find them with their presence hidden. It took him a little over an hour, but Ace finally found Sabo. Now with Sabo on his side, they both concentrated on finding their younger brother. Luffy's always the hardest to find, especially since they have a special rule that they can continue moving about and change their hiding place until the seeker finds them and calls out their name. It made their game more challenging, maybe a little challenging. Luffy giggled to himself as he swung from one branch to another. It was a freeing feeling to have the wind blow past his face and through his hair, almost like when Marco takes him flying. Almost. The trees grew sparser, and he realized he was coming towards the edge of the forest and had to turn back. Before he did, he noticed the presence of 3 people and heard a few voices and decided to investigate out of curiosity. He quietly landed on a thick branch high above the 3 people. One held a sword, while another had a gun, both pointing at one person with a long unsheathed sword perched on his shoulder. All he could see of the other person was white hair. Not really thinking much of what he was doing, Luffy jumped to land in the between the 2 group and stretched his leg to swipe the 2 with the drawn weapon off their feet. Well, that was easy. Luffy scratched the back of his head and tilted it in confusion before he went over the 2 to check if they were conscious or not. They weren't. Satisfied, he turned to look at the person they were threatening. He tilted his head in curiosity. The man in front of him didn't look old. Oh, it wasn't white hair he saw from above. It was a fuzzy white hat with brown spots around the sides. The young man just looked at the girl in front of him with a confused look. not quite sure what just transpired. 1 minute, he had 2 men cornering him, and the next minute, a girl saves his life, though he didn't need the help. They didn't say anything, just gauging each other. One, unsure if the other could be trusted. The other, out of curiosity. Crap, I forgot, Luffy exclaimed in a panic before jumping up and hiding himself in the tree he was in earlier. Moments later, 2 young teenage boys ran out of the trees and stopped to catch their breath with their hands on their knees, startling the young man once again. The blonde looked up and gave him a pleasant smile before asking, "Excuse us, have you seen a girl in a light green dress and a straw hat come this way? About this tall?" He held his hand to just a little under his chest. How should he answer that? He wasn't sure if the girl was being chased too or not. Is she the bad guy or were these 2 boys? Though, she did seem panicked. Should he answer? Should he lie? They don't look dangerous, but looks could be deceiving. He had learned that from that man. He's heard of that man's many failed experiments. Lie it is. No point in endangering the person that just helped him. No, damn it, the darker-haired boy hissed. I could have sworn I felt him here. Then he looked at the stranger. Or maybe it was you. Whose idea was it to add the special rule? The blonde moaned in his hand. How long has this game gone on? Sabo turned to look at his brother when he was nudged in the side. Hey, Sabo, Ace pointed to the 2 down men. You didn't do that, did you? Sabo asked the stranger with a grin. Ace looked up and around in the trees, trying to spot their brother with no luck. Lou, I know you're here somewhere. We give up. Let's go back. They looked directly up where they hear the rustling of leaves. The movement caused a few to rain down on them. Luffy popped his head down and giggled before jumping down in front of his brothers. Yeah, I win again. Sabo grinned at the stranger knowingly. We thank you for your attempt to protect our, sister. I'm Sabo, that's Ace, and that's Lou. He took off his top hat and gave a slight bow in greeting and pointed to each one of his siblings as he introduced them. Trafalgar Law. He nodded at them before looking back at the unconscious men when one of them moaned. Well then, if you would excuse me, I have some business to take care of. Law was surprised once more when Lou handed him a long vine. He'd have thought the 3 would have left already. Thank you. He used it to tie up the men. You ate a devil's fruit, didn't you? Yup. You did a good job taking these guys out in one move, he said as he stood back up to study his handiwork. But I could have taken care of them myself. I know. Sorry. The girl didn't look sorry as she continued to give him a blinding smile. So what's their story? Sabo waved at the unconscious men, then winced when Ace smacked them both on the head when one tried to open his eyes. They were definitely unconscious now. Long story, Law sighed. Weren't you guys leaving? Come with us, the girl practically demanded. Sabo studied the person in front of him before he made up his mind. Luffy wouldn't have invited the other guy if he were a danger to them. We're having a party. You can tell us your long story along the way. He figured he should thank the person for trying to shield their youngest brother from unknown dangers. Law stared at them for a long moment before agreeing. He's hungry anyway and had no money. Might as well get something to eat while he can. If they were dangerous, he could easily take out the 3 of them. Lou, would you mind hanging those bastards somewhere really high where the birds can reach easily? Sabo requested. Okay. Luffy grabbed the end of the 2 vines and stretched up to reach the highest branch he could grab and rocketed them up. So, Ace asked as they waited for Luffy to finish. Why were you being chased by Doflamingo's men? Ace and Sabo had seen the pink bastard's tattoo on both of those men. It was mostly hidden under the men's sleeves, but they saw it. They weren't sure if Luffy saw it or not, but they didn't want to worry the boy. Luffy still showed fear when anyone mentioned the bastard. I ran away from him when he killed the person that saved my life. Long story short, I now have something he wants, Law said darkly. The 2 gave him an overly happy smile that he found creepy. What? He asked warily. Good for you, they both answered before laughing. I don't get it. What's so funny? And how did you know those were Joker's men? Let's just say we have a history with the pink bastard. And we have something he wants too, Ace grinned. Sabo nodded just when Luffy jumped down. He placed an arm around his younger brother's shoulder and brought him into a protective hug. And he'll never get it back. How can you be so sure? He's got men all over the place. I've had many close calls with his men, Law said suspiciously. We're hiding in the safest place in the world, they both said together again. I see. I'm interested to see where this safest place in the world is. Then follow us. We're having a party today, Sabo said. Party, Luffy sang. Food. Bath first, Lou, Ace said. I don't think they're ready yet. Then let's play some more. No, let's just head back and get ready, Sabo said. Now that they've ran into Joker's men, they didn't feel safe to be too far from their family, somewhere safe. How did you know it wasn't me that took those men out? Law asked curiously as he followed the trio. Because you have a sword, Ace said, looking pointedly at the long sword resting on the taller person's shoulder. They didn't have any cuts on them. And because we know Lou's handiwork anywhere, Sabo turned his head around to give a grin. Lou's the only one we know can attack someone and leave people confused. You had this look like you didn't know what just happened when we first saw you. Law trailed after them in comfortable silence, slowing to a stop once they saw the large ship off the shore of the beach. Whitebeard, yeah, he whispered. That's right, Sabo smiled. The safest place in the world. How did you end up with Whitebeard, yeah? Law continued his pace behind them. We kidnapped Pops. Then Pops kidnapped us, Luffy said as he turned his head in an awkward angle to look behind him. That's disturbing, Law pointed out. What is? That we were kidnapped by the person we kidnapped? Ace asked with his arms behind his head. No, that, Law pointed at Luffy. You'll get used to it, Sabo shrugged. He's made of rubber, so he tends to do strange things like that. Hey, kids, Izo waved them over with the newspaper. You have to see this. Luffy stretched his arms to grab a hold of Whitebeard's shoulder, who sat next to Izo and a few other commanders, and rocketed over while Ace and Sabo ran the rest of the way. That left Law to walk in his own slow pace. You boys made the news, Izo announced. Ace and Sabo took the offered newspaper and read it. It was about their little escapade at the Marine base when they busted Sabo out. Why did it take them so long to print this? Sabo asked. Vista held up a poster for them to take. His grin widened as they looked at it. Must be because they couldn't decide what to do with their lack of picture. It was a new wanted poster that was just released. In place of their picture was the symbol they used. Law looked over their shoulder to take a look at the wanted poster once he reached the group. ASL, he asked. Who is this? Whitebeard asked. That's Traffle. Traffle. Trow, Luffy said from the large man's shoulders. Trafalgar Law. Yeah, that. Bad people wanted to kill him, but I stopped them. Luffy kicked his legs back and forth as he told his version of the event. Oh, is that so? Whitebeard gave the young man a considering look, before looking at Ace and Sabo. Our dear sister, Lu, Sabo said, hinting at a game they wanted them to play, along with another message to Whitebeard, knock them out before his men could kill Trow. Lu, Whitebeard took the hint, while the other commanders around them snickered. Why don't you go with Vista to find Marco and help him set things up? Vista helped the boy down from his perch, and they walked away to find the 1st Division commander. Vista whispered to everyone he passed about their new prank they were playing while he was at it. Now then, why is Doflamingo's men after you? Whitebeard asked. And why did you two bring him here? Well, you see. Ace wasn't really sure himself. I don't know, he said sheepishly. Lu said too. Strange reason, Law stated. I would have thought it was because I have something Jokeria wants, not because your younger sister said to. Yeah, that. You're starting to sound like Lu, Sabo teased his brother. It's because he was kind enough to protect Lu because he thought we were after her during our game of hide and seek. I invited him to our party as thanks for trying to protecting her, and technically, Lu told him to come. Oh, that was very kind of you. Thank you for looking after my grandchild. You have something Doflaming wants, you say. How did you get your hand on something that? Whitebeard said conversationally, as he took a sip of alcohol from his large mug. Law stared at the large man with wide eyes before spouting, your grandchild. That caused the commanders there to laugh. All 3 of them are, Izo said, though not by blood. Everyone on the ship is one big family. We call Whitebeard his Pops. The kids calls him Grandpops because they gave the title of Pops to Marco. Let me get this right. Law rubbed his temple. The Popsy you said you kidnapped and then kidnapped you in turn was Marco. Marco the Phoenix. Ace and Sabo nodded with a gleeful grin. How did you even manage that? We can't tell you, the two sang. Haru sighed. Even we don't know how they did it. Marco made them promise not to tell. Must be too embarrassing to tell. Now what was this about you having something Doflamingo want? Whitebeard asked again. Law stayed silent while he looked at Whitebeard, thinking if he should trust this man or not. You can trust Grandpops, Ace and Sabo both said. He's the reason we're free. If it wasn't for him, we'd still be stuck in a cell, and Lu would never learn of the outside world, Sabo said cheerfully. Don't you mean, if it weren't for you kidnapping Marco? Haruta teased. Details, Ace waved it off. Grandpops and the commanders are helping us protect what the pink bastard wants. He can help you too. Just one question first, do you want eternal life? Law asked. Whitebeard's eyes widened before he gave out a loud laugh. What would I do with eternity? We all grow old. We all die. That's what life is about. Without death, there would be no reason to dream. The answer surprised Law, who wouldn't want to live forever if given the chance. He was startled out of his stupor by several of the commanders here. Here, does my answer not satisfy you? Whitebeard asked curiously with a soft smile. I eat the op no mai. In exchange for my own life, I can give another eternal life. That's what Jokeria wants, he finally answered, looking to the ground. He then gave a loud sigh before continuing, not seeing how Whitebeard lifted his hand to silence his sons. I think I should start from the beginning. Law after a thoughtful pause, taking a seat on the sandy beach in front of the captain. Due to circumstances I don't really feel like reliving right now. I willingly joined Doflamingo's family when I was 10. I was dying from a disease, but Kora-san, Jokeria's blood brother, took me around against Jokeria's wishes to find a cure. There is no cure. Instead he gave me the op no mai. Kora-san saved my life, but Joker, you killed him, his own blood brother. To sum it up, I've been in his family for 2 years, with Kora-san for a year before he was killed, and on the run for the past 4 years with a few close calls. Really, why did he tell them all this? He still was on the fence about joining them, but seeing how Whitebeard took in 3 children claiming they were wanted by Joker made him feel safe. Whitebeard is known for taking care of their own, whether it be attacks by the Marines or other pirates. We've never met the family, Ace mused. We were, slaves for his subordinates. I guess that's what they were. For about 5 years, Sabo said. We were freed and stayed with grandpops. You should stay here too. Ace gave Law a smile, already liking the other for wanting to protect Luffy. Lou thinks you should stay. I agree, Whitebeard said. It'd be safer for you if you were under my protection, especially if you know so much about the family. He wouldn't stop to get you back in order to keep you quiet. Sounds like he'd want you to use your abilities for his own purpose. There is no need to let everyone know about your ability to give eternal life if you'd like. Just the ones here, and I'm sure not one of us have a need for it. The commanders around him nodded in agreement. Ace, Sabo, a member from Division 10, called out to the boys. Your, sister needs a bath. She kind of ran amok in the kitchen. Coming, the boys yelled back. Isn't she old enough to bathe herself? Law asked. Yes, but if left on her own, Lou may drown herself in the tub or something equally stupid. Sabo sighed as he got up to leave with Ace. Something to keep in mind if you join us. Lou is a heart attack waiting to happen. Haruta snickered. That's a good way to put it, Yoi. Marco huffed as he walked up to the group. His shirt looked like it got burned in parts and had what looked like sauce dripping from his hair. The kid nearly burned down the ship, instead of the other 2. Who's this Yoi? You're not going to take a bath with them? Looks like you need it. This is Trafalgar Law. Lou recruited him. Sounds like he and those brats have something in common, Izo said. Marco glared at Izo. The last time I took a bath with them, the 3 of them nearly drowned themselves while trying to save each other, and I worked up a sweat, Yoi. Welcome to the family, Law. I swear, those 3 are going to give me gray hair. That's because you worry too much. You need to relax, said Fusha. Law didn't even have a chance to say anything about his joining them. Maybe Pops should have made you their caretaker instead, Marco countered. Sorry, no thanks. I'm already mostly bald, and I'm not ready to handle the title of Pops yet. Sorry to interrupt, commanders, but we need some extra helping hands in the kitchen. One of the cooks came out to tell them. But we can't cook, Izo pointed out. No, but you can repair things. Everyone else is already doing something. They all groaned as Marco grinned at them. Have fun, guys. I still need to pick up some supplies from town after I clean up once the boys are done, Yoi. Law, you're coming with us. Haruta dragged a stunned Law with them. Divided by. So what's this party for? Law asked from his seat next to Lou as he eyed the fancy decorations. They didn't tell you. Ace asked around a mouthful of food. We're celebrating our birthday, our first wanted poster, and you joining, Sabo replied, thankfully after he finished swallowing. Special day indeed, and I never agreed on joining. Law sighed. So how old are you now? 12. Luffy threw out his arms into the air, causing a piece of his meat to land on someone's head. Ops, that surprised Law. It's your birthday too. You're small. We're 15. It's all 3 of our birthday. It's the day we were reborn, so to speak, Sabo explained. Since it's the same day you're joining, it can be your birthday too. Oh, pass. About that wanted poster? Law asked curiously. Seems they're ignoring the fact that he never said he'd join. What's with that picture? You don't have a choice. It's your birthday too. ASL, Ace, Sabo, Lou, and the wings represents our freedom. Ace drew it in the sand for him to see. Lou designed it. What did you do to get 10 million, bully? Sabo handed him the newspaper clipping he cut out. Don't ruin it. I'm putting that in our album. 18 dead, 84 injured, entire base destroyed. You 3 did this for no reason at all. Law clearly didn't believe it. The news didn't even mention that the Marine had Sabo or that Marco was involved. It just said the 3 kids came to wreak havoc for no apparent reason. They didn't even name who the children were either. Sabo thinks it's because his dad didn't want people to know he's related to some hoodlums. I think Pops helped with the injured count. Not sure if the numbers are correct, but yeah, we blew the place up. Ace grinned. They deserved it. They took Sabo from us. They're calling you demon children out for blood for no apparent reason. Law grinned at them, which the 2 boys returned. Numbers sounds right, Lou answered, all the while shoving food in her mouth. Not very ladylike, is she? Law mumbled under his breath. And how would you know? I counted. Luffy was forced to stop talking as both Ace and Sabo shoved more food in his mouth. Law blinked at that. Okay, she counted. Law shook his head before he remembered what he had wanted to ask earlier. What is it that you have that Joker you wants? Seems fair since I told you. He looked concerned as Lou chalked on her food, Ace and Sabo on either side patting her back. Marco came by with a glass of juice for her to drink. We don't talk about that person around Lou Yoi, Marco whispered as took a seat and placed Lou on his lap. All better, Lou. both his brothers asked worriedly. Yeah, she rasped back as she snuggled her face into Marco's chest. You know, Law tried for a change of topic. With as much as you eat, I'm surprised you're so short. Or maybe that wasn't a good topic if he went by Thatch's grimace from his left. He just wanted to tease them. Probably because Lou can't seem to stay still for a second. Ace grinned at him as he pointed to his sister. Law saw what he meant. The kid kept on moving, whether it be her arms stretching to get more food or her legs twitching or some other body part. She's always in some sort of motion. So you're saying that if she ate a normal amount, she'd disappear from using too much energy? Law smirked. Never thought of it that way. Sabo placed his pointer finger and thumb to his chin and thought. Law's smirk dropped. Don't test it. I was teasing. Wasn't going to. Sabo waved the idea off. I was just thinking. Do you think it's something we should be worried about, Pops? He asked Marco. I'm surprised it took you boys this long to realize something's up, Yoy. You boys have enough on your plate, and we didn't want you to worry any more than you had to, so we didn't say anything. It's nothing too serious though, so don't worry about it, Yoy, Marco said. What? Ace placed the food in his hand back down on the plate. There's something wrong with Lou, but me and Sabo eat a lot too. She eats more than we do, Ace, and she's a lot shorter than we were at that age. Ace turned worried eyes to their caretaker. What's wrong with Lou? Luffy turned and tilted his head at his brother when he heard his nickname. Marco ruffled the boy's hair, handing him plate to get him to eat again. Just a slight nutrition deficiency. It's what is stunting her growth, Yoy. Kobato is working with Thatch with your meals. Or did you not notice how much energy you have now compared to before? Or that Thatch only cooks for you and the commanders, while the others cooks for everyone else, Yoy? Now that you mention it, Sabo said. So what? Cooks are like doctors then? Ace said as he continued to stuff his face. Not quite, Thatch laughed. I can only help the body heal through healthy food. This Kobato is a doctor. Law asked in interest. She's our doctor, Sabo answered. She's a pediatrician. She treats underprivileged kids at every island. I think Kobato's in town right now. That was when Kobato walked, just returning from her trip to town, arms full of medical supplies. That's right. Pops helped me fulfill my lifelong dream. To be able to treat children who wouldn't normally be able to see a doctor because of financial difficulties is a dream come true, she swooned before sighing. Cost of medication is expensive in a lot of places, and children sometimes get put on the back burner because they don't contribute to the family or because they have no parents to provide for them. You must be Trafalgar Law. Marco told me about you while he was in town. Law hummed as he took in the information. Do you think you can teach me? I want to be a surgeon, but there's only so much I can learn on my own. Sure, I don't mind. Izo is our head doctor, though. You may learn more from him. We even have a couple of surgeons also. I double as a nurse on the ship when we're short-staffed. It's not like we make a habit of picking up children for me to treat, she laughed. She was in a sad state of depression when we picked her up, Yoy, Marco said after Kobato left to put her things away. That week we found her. She didn't have a choice but to let a little girl die because her family didn't have the money to continue the treatment, Yoy. At the time, she couldn't give out free treatment because her own financial hardship. Law really should have realized it. He really should have. One minute he was helping the crew clean up after the party, bringing things back to the ship, and the next, the ship was moving. Moby Dick has left the island without so much as a warning, leaving him stranded on the ship. By the time he realized they'd left, it was already too late for him to dive overboard and swim back to shore. As soon as he was shown to a room where he'd be staying, because everyone there was convinced that he's staying with them, Law heaved a sigh and figured he's stuck with them, or at least until he finds a way to get away from them, if he even feels like it. It was tempting to stay with the offer of learning from real surgeons. There's only so much he can learn from books and dead animals. A week later, a week of saving Lou from drowning herself by almost every strange happenings he'd never thought could happen, Law found himself unable to leave the strange girl alone on a potentially dangerous place. Not that the crew members were dangerous. Everyone there seems to dot on the trio, but because the girl seems to find trouble just about every day. Law mildly wondered if anyone ever taught the girl any common sense. Really, how can anyone nearly strangle and drown herself doing laundry? Not to mention that the trio grew on him. It was like living with his sister again, to have a younger sibling to look after. There is no replacing his sister, but his older brother instincts is still with him after so long. The three of them were crazy. They need someone sane to watch over them. He's going to ignore the fact that there's plenty of others on the ship to watch over them and the fact that his heart was already set on staying ever since telling Whitebeard what Joker wanted from him. Divided by. Law woke up one morning to someone opening the door to the room they gave him, which was across from Marco's. He groaned as he opened his eyes and turned his head to see Thatch peeking in his room. That's the first time that's happened since his stay here. Ops, the man said sheepishly. I forgot. Just give me a minute. He went over to move the desk and placed a hand on the floor and held the board up as he crouched down. Why is there a trapdoor in this room? Law yawned, rubbing his already messed up hair. There's one in every room. Or did you not notice how the brats tends to show up anywhere and everywhere at any given time? But this is the only entrance we can use, Thatch said as he stuck his head down. Good morning, brats. Go away, Law heard someone say from beneath, voice laced with sleep. Curious, he walked over to get a peek. You don't like it when we show up in your room unannounced. So don't do that to poor Law, you hypocrite. It sounded like Sabo the closer he got. Awa, don't be like that. It's almost time for your shift. We know. That one sounded like Ace. He got on his hands and knees to take a peek and saw them in a hammock right under where his bed is. He saw Ace and Sabo glare at the both of them with bleary eyes, with Lou snuggled in between them, still asleep. You have 30 minutes to get up and ready, Thatch said, trying to coax them out of bed. So, Sabo dropped his head back down and closed his eyes. Lou's not awake yet. Ace followed suit, squishing his face into Lou's back. We'll come out when he's awake. I'm awake, Lou mumbled with his face pressed into Sabo's side. Don't want to get up. Tired. You boys stayed up late again. You really need to stop doing that. Sleep is good for growing kids. They groaned in response. So this is where they sleep, Law said thoughtfully. I just assumed they slept with the rest of the crew. This is interesting. He looked at Thatch questioningly when he was stopped from going down. They bobby-trapped the place. I wouldn't go down there if I were you. Bobby-trapped like they do to the rest of the ship. They're harmless, Law tried again but was stopped once more. No, bobby-trapped as in, they don't want unwanted visitors. The last time I tried, I was nearly taken out by a hammer, a really big hammer. That's because all you commanders know about that door. And the last time we let you all in, you threw a party down here. Everything was trashed. And we had to clean everything. Sabo glared at the man. Do you know how hard it is to get cleaning supplies in and out of this place? And all those delicate toys that were broken had to be replaced. My toys, Lou moaned. Sabo's already made new ones. Lou, Ace said. Oh, okay. I'm awake now. Lou sat up and waved at the two above him. Good morning. Come on, Ace, Sabo. We have work. Let's go find birds. With another groan, the other two sat up and rubbed their eyes and got off their hammock. Lou climbed up to the beam right above him and crawled to the other end and did something before coming back. Wanna come down, Trow? Don't worry. Lou already disengaged the trap. There won't be any sharp objects flying at you, Sabo said when he looked up and saw Law's wary look. Thatch left as Law climbed down the ladder, the door closing on its own. He looked at the door in interest. An auto-close mechanism. He thought to himself. Spacious, he said as he wondered about their room. There were childish scribbles and drawings hanging on one wall. Yeah, well, we did take over 3/4 of their cargo hold. This ship is huge. You won't believe how many times we got lost when we first joined, Ace said as he changed his clothes before rummaging through another closet full of dresses. Lou, come here. Oh, I want to wear Sabo's clothes today, Lou whined, tugging at the end of her too large t-shirt that came down to the thigh of her shorts. Should be fine, Sabo said as he eyed Law. Law averted his eyes as he heard a cheer and walked over to a bookshelf. You have an interest in medicine? He asked as he fingered a book. I'm interested in everything, Sabo said from next to him. You want to be a doctor, right? You can have those books. I'm done with them. Not sure what you already know, but it wouldn't hurt, right? Law nodded as he looked at the other titles. You really are interested in everything, he mused as he saw all the variety of topics the shelves held: guns, swords, shipbuilding, recipes, history books of various islands, arts, children's books, coloring books, fairy tales, and some journals just to name a few. Sabo's teaching me lots of stuff, Lou said as she bounced up to them. Law took in the clothes the girl had on. Long blue shorts with a small knife strapped on one leg, a small pistol on the other, blue jacket over a white dress shirt, and a neckerchief. Fancy. The hat clashes though, he said. You've always wore things like that. He turned to Sabo. Looks stifling. Sabo brought his fists down to his side. Wearing an almost identical outfit, but maroon in color. They're comfortable, he said as if daring Law to say otherwise. Looks stifling, Law repeated himself with a smirk. Breakfast is ready, Thatch called out from somewhere before Sabo could retort back. Amazing. You can hear everything, he said as he listened to the going-ons above deck. So Sabo is the one to build all this, Law mused as he watched Lou pulled open another door to the galley. Flamenco built it. He said he didn't want kids to be playing with dangerous tools. Ace thought of all the ideas. I made the plans, Sabo said as he climbed up and made room for Ace to come up, with the door closing right behind him. It was seamless. He couldn't even see where the door opened at and pressed down to see how it worked. It didn't budge. He shrugged it off and followed the trio to their usual bench. They finished their meal and was just getting up to go to their post when Haruta came by with another man. Hey, Lou, could you come to the training room in about an hour? Johnny here needs practice with the sword. I got permission from Marco already. He's the one that suggested it, saying that you'd know how to gauge his strength and adjust. It'd be good training for you too. Okay, thanks so much, kid, Johnny said. I'd rather you not, Johnny said bashfully. I'm still no good, and it'd be embarrassing. Yeah, no slacking. You're on lookout, Ace pointed out. Since there wasn't much else to do with so many crew members on Moby Dick, Marco had Law follow the same schedule as Ace and Sabo. Izo told him he could come to the infirmary during his free time to learn. Law joined them in the crow's nest after detouring to his room to retrieve his long sword. So you're a swordsman, Lu? Yeah. Lu's an all-rounder, Sabo said from his position on the east side. The crow's nest is large enough to hold a table, 4 chairs, and room to hold a few more adults. Lu's amazing. We've been working on her strength so that she can take on someone as strong as Vista one day. And working on using Lu's rubber ability. Aim sucks, packs a punch but aim sucks, Ace said from the north. He gave the taller teen a look. I don't recommend asking for a duel. You'll be sorry, he warned while holding up a flaming fist. An hour later, after Lu jumped off the tower, Law finally asked what he's been wanting to know. He couldn't ask before in the week he's been with them because the girl was always with them. So what is it that Joker you wants that you have? Sabo hummed and grinned. You used to be in on everything that goes on in that family of his for a few years, right? I'm sure you'll figure it out eventually. That doesn't seem fair, Law grumbled. Hint, we're not really hiding it, Ace grinned. You've already seen it, Sabo giggled. Law couldn't only sigh at the response. If he's already seen it, does it mean it was something in their room? He gave another sigh. They kept lookout in comfortable silence before Law asked quietly. Was Lu ... was Lu with you when you had to work for that man? Lu, Ace trailed as his thoughts turned back to the past, voice somber. Lu's been with them longer than we had. She was with the family for about a year before we met her. Lu was so small back then. Only 2, I think. Didn't know a thing about her or her age until we came to Whitebeard. Sabo continued when Ace trailed off once more. You seem awfully interested in our Lu. You've been keeping careful eyes on her since you joined. Sabo grinned. Both he and Ace knew they could trust Law. They could see how much he cares for their brother. Law shrugged. I used to have a younger sister. I guess she reminds me of her. Though, my sister wasn't anywhere near as stupid. Made me want to protect her. Big brother instinct, I guess. You and everyone else here. Sabo turned back to look at the sea somberly. Lu doesn't need us to protect her, though. She needs us to protect ourselves. We're important to her, so we have to get stronger so she doesn't need to worry about us. Why did you willingly join Joker? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Just curious, Ace said. Law leaned back and looked to the sky to clear his thoughts. I was born and raised in Flevens, in North Blue. It was a flourishing island where amber lead was mined. What we didn't know was that the amber lead that was being mined was poisonous. It was slowly killing the people there. The world government and the royal family knew about the poisoning but didn't do a thing about it. A neighboring island went to war with Flevens, thinking amber lead poisoning was contagious. It wasn't. Everyone was killed. My parents, my sister, my friends, everyone. I was only 9. I was done with everything. I wanted to destroy as much of the world as I could before I died from the poison. I estimated that I only had about 3 years left to live. I escaped by hiding in a pile of corpses that were taken out of the island. I'm not even sure how I did it, but I found the Donquixote pirates and asked them to let me join. He paused there to collect his thoughts. He continued with a softer tone of voice. That was where I met Kora-san, Jokerya's blood brother. Kora-san was actually a marine spy, but Jokerya didn't know. He was the one to give me the op no mai to save my life. You know, Law said in thought, Jokerya used to brag about this kid he raised. Something about making an army of the brat. He'd bring in kids after kids, sometimes babies, while I was with him. I don't know what he did to them, but they all died without lasting a week. When I asked about that kid he raised once, he told me he sent his boy out to train with 2 other promising kids. I'm actually surprised that he didn't send those monsters after me. Who knows, maybe you'll meet them someday, Ace mumbled with his head perched in his hand. Wouldn't want to. I've heard the reports, Law said, crossed his arm on the ledge and perched his head on them. They're ruthless. Nothing but corpse. Success rate 100%. Not to say I haven't killed, but those were all in self-defense. These boys are much younger than I am. To be able to kill that many people at such young age is something only someone without moral can do. Or a psychopath. Or maybe he wasn't taught any better, Ace said. You said he was raised by Joker. Maybe he was brainwashed. Sabo finished. Maybe, Law sighed. Ace and Sabo hummed, but didn't say anything else. There was nothing else they can say. They were the monsters he's heard about after all. I used to be a noble, Sabo said to clear the uncomfortable silence that fell on them. I was practically my parents' puppet. I was to be married to the princess of our kingdom to bring up my parents' status. After learning that my parents never really cared about me, just what I could do for them, I ran away to live in a trash heap. From riches to rags, Ace laughed. That's where I met Sabo. I was living with mountain bandits at the time. They were okay. I survived. They let me do what I want and mostly left me alone. Unless it was to teach me to hunt so they didn't have to get their own food. From what Gramps said, I guess they cared for us in their own strange way. It was during one of our trips to the forest with the bandit leader that we were kidnapped. And well, the rest is history, I guess, Sabo grinned at Law. Now we have a warm family who cares for us. And Lou, Ace said with a lopsided smile. Lou made my life so much brighter. Even though we met in what has to be hell, Lou just made things better. My dad is Gul D. Roger. He smirked at Law's stunned face. I used to hate my life and my blood just because of that man. Thought that my life wasn't worth my own mother's life. I should have been the one to die. I was a kid with a death wish, fighting with men 3 times my size. But Lou didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to stay by my side. No matter how many times I tried to push her away. Whitebeard and Shanks made it all better. It's nice hearing about my dad from people who really knew him. I was used to hearing how much of a monster he was and that he deserved to die. Grandpops told me, we're all children of the sea. Who our parents are doesn't matter. Trust me, Sabo sighed. It wasn't easy to get him out of that stump. Then we get kidnapped and had to do things we didn't want. We were both ready to kick the bucket and be done with it when they toss us a toddler of all things. Next thing we knew, we had to do what we could to survive just so we could keep Lou safe. Who knew what would have happened to Lou if we were there? The next people who gets her might not take good care of her. There was a few minutes of silence before Sabo asked another question. How did your exam go with Izo? Good, Law answered. Nothing wrong with me. And since I'm only 17, Izoya told me to just go to Kobadoya if I ever need medical treatment. There aren't enough patients on board for her, he said. After their shift was over, they found Johnny asleep in the training room against the wall, with Lou snuggled in his arms. Marco was right about little Lou. Haruta said as he walked up to them. We just might ask her to help out in here now and then, if you boys don't mind, that is. We don't mind if Lou doesn't, Ace and Sabo said. Unknown ship sighted at 3 o'clock. Their lookout replacement shouted a half hour later as they sat in the training room, waiting for Luffy to wake up. The announcement woke the two sleeping. How far? They heard Whitebeard ask. They all went out to sea, about 30 minutes away. Black flag. There was a pause as the man strained to see the mark. A rookie, sorry, I forgot their name. Let's wait and see what they want, but be ready for battle. They didn't have to wait long. As soon as they were close enough, the other ship opened fire, and soon enough, there was a battle on Moby Dick. Luffy took a seat along the cabin wall with Law doing the same. There were many others that joined them. They weren't all needed and left it to the ones that felt like it. It was how they did things. They gauge how strong the enemy is before sending a few more men to fight. You don't want to fight? Lou asked Law as he stared at the battle ahead of them. Nah, I'll just sit back and watch. Hey, Lou, Ace ran over to them with a large smile. Want to help? Luffy's eyes widened in understanding and grinned. Okay, come on, Trow. He pulled at the other teen's hand. Unsure of what was going on, Law just followed them to the enemy ship. Why, pray tell, are we on the enemy's ship? He grunted as he knocked a man into the sea with his sword still sheathed. Treasure hunting. Lou laughed as he stretched his leg and whipped a few others overboard. You 3 go on ahead, Sabo said as he fended off a few of the attackers with a pipe he picked up from being trashed. Luckily, most of the pirates were on Moby, leaving just a few left to guard the ship. The trio came back up with a large bag each filled to the brim to find Sabo waiting for them. What took so long? I was getting bored. Looks like everyone up there is done too. Lou gave the blonde a hug and giggled. Sorry, I got lost. And I'm not surprised. He ruffled the dark hair, knocking the straw hat back. Let's go back home. You boys got everything you want, Yoi? Marco asked once they boarded their ship. Yup. Ace grinned. Good. Get rid of that ship, Yoi, Marco said as he walked away. Ace and Sabo shot down a combined fire fist at the ship, leaving it to burn in open sea. Law whistled. Devil fruit users too, huh? I thought it wasn't possible to share devil fruit powers. Or do you both have different devil fruit? Same, they both answered. It was an accident. Not sure if it can be replicated or not. Sabo shrugged. Let's go to the treasury and split it up. Half of this is for you, Ace said to Law. I thought you were getting this for the captain, Law asked as he watched Lou drag the bag she had over to Thatch and opened it up to show him all the stolen food, before coming back to join them. Whitebeard rule, we keep what we plunder, Ace grinned. You helped, so you get half. You can pick what you want to keep. Half seems much, considering there are 3 of you and 1 of me. The 3 of us already have our own stash, so don't worry about it, Ace waved it off. Ace and Law dropped their bags on the floor once they made it in the treasury. This is our section. Sabo pointed out a corner filled with gold and other trinkets. He then pointed out sections dedicated to other divisions, while Luffy went around putting a few handfuls of their half into each division, adding more into the 4th division. What is she doing? Law asked. Well, we figured since we don't really need this much money, we share our loot with the other divisions. 4th division gets more since we eat a lot. And that one, Ace pointed to a spot that wasn't designated to any division, is for Kobato. We're adding funds for her to treat more kids. Our caretakers never had money for our treatment and had to steal medicines and stuff to take care of us, so we know what it's like to not have the money for medicines. Sabo shuddered. There were a few times when we weren't sure one or the other would make it because of some bad infections that could easily be fixed with the right treatment. A few days later, Law found himself in a clearing in the middle of a jungle on a deserted island with Lu, starting a fire for their lunch. The island is so small that it took them less than a day to explore. Ace and Sabo went off somewhere to find something to eat, saving whatever Thatch made for them for emergency. Whitebeard and the rest of crew had been called out by one of the other Yonko for something and thought it'd be safer to leave them behind in case things went bad. It wouldn't be a good idea for them to get involved in one of their battle. Joker worked under Kaido after all. They were left there with a small ship that belonged to the kids. Ace and Sabo had put up a pirate flag with Whitebeard's mark and their winged ASL symbol over it. Law was quite surprised to find the small ship and two other one-person boat when they opened the randomly placed door near the front of the ship of their undersea room. It's been 2 days, and they had no idea when Whitebeard would be back for them. Law looked at Lu as her head suddenly turned to a direction opposite of where Ace and Sabo went. What's wrong? 2 people. That way. Not strong, very weak. They're probably lost. As long as they don't bother us, it's fine. Law sighed as he poked the fire once more. Lu continued to look in that direction and hummed distractedly. Something wrong. Just curious. Leave them be. It's not a good idea to cause any trouble on a deserted island with just the 4 of us. None of us can swim. They could have at least left someone with us, Law grumbled. So how did the 3 of you get your fruits anyway? He asked to distract the girl. Lu told him the whole story of how they met Shanks and stole his treasure box. Law smiled fondly at the excited way she told the story with her arms waving here and there. She was very animated in her storytelling. She even went on to tell him her dream to be a pirate king. So that's how they both have the same power. It's very rare for 2 people to share the same fruit ability. They're probably the only ones, Law said as she finished. Ace and Sabo is special, Lu said proudly. And Grandpops and Pops and Thatch and all the other commanders. Is that so? They know everything, and they don't hate me. I like them. They're special, so I have to protect them. Now he was curious. What is this everything they know? He asked in a way that sounded like it didn't matter. How can anyone hate you? He thought to himself. But he didn't get his answer. Lu got up and ran in the direction she was looking after yelling she'd be right back. She didn't look too concerned, so he just shrugged and continued to watch over the fire and wait for their lunch to be caught. There are no animals to speak of, but at least Ace and Sabo can fish something. Law really wished Whitebeard left them with someone who could swim. Left with nothing better to do, he tested his observation haki, stretching it as far as he could. Law had learned a little on his own, but with Marco training him, he's improved much quicker than by himself. He found he could almost cover the whole small island. There was a presence that he assumed was Lu moving towards 2 other that weren't moving. He couldn't find Ace or Sabo anywhere though. Not that it meant much, they were probably out on their ship, too far for him to reach. He kept trying to find the 2 anyway. Lu could do it, so why is it he can't? That thought led to many more questions about the girl. She could do many things that he had no answers for. How is she always able to find Ace and Sabo when they concealed their presence? How does she know if a person is strong or not and gauge their strength? Was she trained like he was with the Doflamingo family members? No, probably not. It sounded like she would have been much too young for that kind of dangerous training. He was startled out of his thoughts when he heard a yell to run. He looked up to see a young boy wearing only a pair of long shorts running towards him, carrying 2 much older, unconscious men under his arms. Looks like Lu was wrong. There were 3 others on the island with them. Once the boy was within view, he repeated himself. Run, fire, wait, my sis, a girl I'm with is still out there. Law started to run in the direction the 3 came from, but the boy stuck his foot out and tripped him. What are you talking about? There's no one else on this island. Hurry, the fire's spreading fast. The boy gave him a stern look. Don't make me knock you out too. I don't have enough arms to carry all of you. Law could feel the heat from the fire by now. It was getting closer. And where do you suggest we go? This whole island is going to burn down at this rate. He tried his observation haki again to try to find Lu, at the same time keeping an eye on the boy, who looked like he was looking for something. This way, the boy said before taking off in that direction, not even looking to see if Law followed. There was only a slight pause before the taller boy cursed and followed behind them. There wasn't much else he could do but to trust the young boy to know what he's doing. He couldn't find Lu, and the fire was spreading too fast. Hopefully she's noticed the fire and went somewhere safe. Where are we going? He asked. Off the island, was all the answer he got. Law saw Ace and Sabo on the beach with their ship, looking worried. They were already on their way back to the island and saw the smokes. On the ship, now, the boy yelled at them. They looked surprised at first, but did as they were told. Right, they both answered as they went to work to get the boat ready to set sail again. They'd just gotten back from fishing and had just unloaded their catch on the beach. Law wondered why they were listening to this random kid as he bent over to catch his breath once they reached their boat. Luga, he panted. Luya is still on the island. We have to find her. Later, Sabo grunted as he pulled the sail in position. Push the boat off. Your sister is still on the island. And you're going to leave her behind just because some random brat says to leave. He yelled at them, furious that he had misjudged them. Ace and Sabo stopped what they were doing to look at him. They gave him a grateful smile. Thanks for worrying about Lou, Ace said. We'll explain as soon as we're far enough that flying flames don't burn our ship. Lou is safe. We promise. He didn't quite understand why they weren't worried. But if they say she's safe, then he'll have to believe them until they explained. Once they were deemed at a safe distance, they watched in silence as the island burned. Sabo, the boy, whined on top of the two still unconscious men. I'm cold. You know this kid. Law jabbed a thumb towards the kid as Sabo placed his jacket over the boy's bare shoulder. Of course, Sabo grinned. So do you. Look at him very carefully. Law studied the boy that was staring right back at him with wide innocent eyes and big bright smile. He does look somewhat familiar. Looking the boy up and down, he noticed a very familiar knife and pistol strapped to his thighs. Though, now that he was really looking, how could he have missed the scar under the left eye? Luya, he asked in disbelief. The boy grinned at him and snickered. Meet our brother Luffy. Also known as Lou, Ace grinned mischievously. Please explain. Law moaned in his hands. All the worry and stress finally left his body, leaving him tired and exhausted from all that excitement. Oh, Luffy exclaimed as he peered over the side of the boat. Hey, be careful, Law yelled at him as he pulled the boy back. None of us can swim. I have an idea, Luffy sang, walking towards their smaller-than-usual cannon. What are you doing? Law asked warily, but it was too late. Ace and Sabo pulled him down as the boat rocked violently. If they hadn't been surrounded by the tall walls of the boat, they might have fallen off the side. Law's eyes widened in shock as a large sea king surfaced, looking very angry. His voice caught in his throat when Luffy stretched to pull the angry sea creature's whiskers and brought it close to his face. Law felt an invisible wave of some sort wash over him as the boy demanded the sea king to put out the fire, lest they eat it. The sea king looked at the boy in fear before going back under and swam towards the island. It came back up so quickly that some of the ocean sprayed onto the island, and it flipped its tail a few times, sending large waves over the island, and the fire was put out. Thank you, Luffy waved cheerily at its cowering form. Conqueror's Haki, Law breathed in awe. Look, Luffy pointed at the island, we can go back now. What's with these two? Sabo asked as he pulled one off the boat. Shipwreck, Luffy answered from his seat on a rock. Floated on a piece of wood and landed here this morning. They wanted to do a smoke signal but messed up. They ran all over the place and wouldn't calm down, so I hit them. Dress caught on fire. He pouted. I'm hungry. Everything we caught went up in flames. And it's too late to fish some more. Good thing Thatch packed us a lot of food. Ace got up to bring back some food from the boat. One of the men groaned and sat up with a hand to his head. The first thing that caught his eyes was the black pirate flag. It was the flag of the notorious ASL monsters. This was the first time he'd heard they were affiliated with Whitebeard though. He'd heard what they did at that one marine base. He squeaked and looked to his left, where three boys watched him with varied amusement. Hello there, the blonde waved at him. How nice of you to wash up on our island. Though it wasn't very nice of you to burn it down. The man turned to see the rest of the island behind the boy. There was nothing left but burned down stumps and twigs. The man tapped at his companion, waking him up in the process, just as Ace came back with food. We don't have enough food for them too, the boy said to his brothers. Looks like we only have enough for 4 more days, if we don't catch anything. I can share, the youngest offered. No, the other yelled at him, causing the boy to flinch. But they're hungry too, the boy pouted. Ace and Sabo sighed. Fine, they can have some of ours. You have to eat everything though, Ace said as he split the food. And, what happened to you? We were on a cruise ship when a storm capsized the ship, one explained nervously. A civilian? Law asked. Not only that, Sabo muttered darkly, nobles. They're the only civilians that can afford to board a cruise ship. Just take a look at their clothing. And you can tell. Looks like something you would wear, Law stated. Exactly, Sabo spat as he stood up. They all watched as he slowly walked over to the two men and pointed his staff at them. Don't even think of trying any funny business. I know how you people think. If I feel that you are a threat to my brothers, I won't think twice of killing you. Want to tie them up after they finish eating? Ace asked once Sabo went back to his seat between him and Luffy. He knew that having nobles near them upsets his brother. If, one of the men stuttered, if you could just drop us off at an island with civilization, it would be much appreciated. Can't, Law said. We'll pay you, the other joined. Your small boat is big enough for us all. We'll even pay you any amount you want. We can even pay for the damages to your island. Luffy gave them a sad look. Money isn't going to bring the plants back. Not our island anyway. We're just here waiting. If you don't want money, what do you want? We'll give it to you. They were sounding desperate at this point. All you have to do is take us to the next island. I just said we can't, Law bit out before sighing. We don't have a log pose. All we have is an eternal pose that's set to go back to the main ship. Law still doesn't how that was possible. I don't think you'd want that, especially if they left us here because they're doing something dangerous. You'll have to wait until they come and pick us up. That had the men quiet. No, they did not want to meet the strongest man in the sea. They were going to have to find another way off the island themselves. They eyed the youngest, who had started eating before the food was finished being divvied, as an idea formed. Luffy put his drumstick down slowly and turned his head to the two men with a glare, just as Ace was handing them their plates. Ace, don't waste food, he said with a serious voice. Greedy people don't deserve to eat. Huh, you were the one that didn't want them to starve, Ace said as he turned to look at his brother. Before anyone could say anything, one of the noble lounged at Ace, only to pass through flames and catch himself on fire. Well, what do you know? Sabo grinned at the other man, who had a horrified look as he watched his friend scream and roll around to put himself out. Their true colors didn't stay hidden very long. Now did it? Should I put that guy out his misery? Ace asked no one in particular as he eyed the flaming man in the sand. He held his hand out with his thumb up and pointing finger aimed at the guy. Yes, please, Law said, perturbed that the three brothers weren't put off by the blood-curdling screams. If you don't, I will. They watched and waiting for Ace to put the guy out of his misery, only to find out their brother fell asleep before he could. Ace, Sabo moaned with his hand to his face, you have horrible timing. Trow, could you take care of them while I wake Ace up? The oldest hesitating a moment too long for Luffy. Getting tired of the noise coming from the burning man, Luffy took his pistol out of his holster and fired at the man, killing him instantly. You took too long, the youngest explained at the look Law gave him. He was noisy. The sound of gunfire woke Ace up, and he fired as if he didn't fall asleep, causing his fire bullet to go right through Sabo. Ops, sorry, Sabo. Lucky it was me. Sabo smacked Ace on the back of his head. You fell asleep again. Too shocked to do or say anything, Law just gave up and ate his lunch. The other man just sat there, shivering from fear, and watched them go on as if the smallest kid hadn't just killed someone. This time Sabo walked up to him with a scowl and a plate in his hand. I'm only giving you this because I feel sorry for you, but this is all you get, he said and dropped the plate, causing everything to fall off the plate and onto the sand. The man couldn't believe it. He's a noble. There's nothing to be afraid of. He's a noble, and everyone should bow down to him. His friend didn't make it because he didn't use his status right. His friend didn't deserve the title of noble. You know, kid, I can give you everything you'd ever wanted. I can even make you a noble, where you'll be rich and wouldn't have to work for the rest of your life, man sneered, knowing that most people would fall for it. All you have to do is take me home, and I can give you everything. Sabo turned around slowly and gave the man the most pleasant smile he could muster. My former status had me up there to marry the princess of my kingdom. I have no need for your sorry excuse of a status. Anyway, I gave up my noble status a long time ago. What would I do with riches? Money can't buy me a warm family. Sure, I'd always have food to keep me alive, but what about my freedom? I don't like going around watching how I walk or talk. A golden cage is just a cage. Besides, being a pirate is better than being a noble any day. If there's anything we want, we take it. With that, Sabo turned about around to walk away. The noble man was pissed that his plan didn't work. He was even more sore about the fact that this pirate child's noble status was much higher than his. But the kid gave up his status, right? That means it wouldn't matter what happens to the kid. With his anger clouding his thoughts, he picked up a broken branch that was laying next to him. Before he could even lift his arm to stab the blonde teen, a knife came for his throat. Law looked down to Lou next to him and saw cold fury in the boy's eyes. Thanks, Lou, Sabo said, ruffling the kid's hair, but I could have handled it. The cold look left Luffy's eyes, and he went on eating happily. You owe me a lot of explanations, Law said as he set his empty plate to the side, now satisfied. Not much to explain, Ace said. We let Lou wear what he wants, Sabo continued. Sometimes he likes to wear dresses. Other times, he wears our old clothes. We decided to have some fun and see how long it'd take you to figure him out. We like pranking new members, so it's not the first time we've done this. The other prank was to pretend we were ghosts haunting the ship, and the whole ship was in on it. Yup, they both grinned, and we lost the bet. There was a bet going on. Law scowled. How long did you bet on? A week, Sabo sighed as he fingered the dirt. Thought you were smarter than that, but then you had to go and hide on bath days. Law remembered the first one. Someone covered his eyes from behind him when he heard the boys yelling and running around. It was an odd sight once he was released. Almost half the crew on deck had some sort of dress or towel in their hands. He shook his head when Lou yelled at the brothers for forgetting clothes once again. After that, he just stayed in his room until he was sure they were done. Does he always do that, or did you let him run around naked to win your bet? He always does that. Ace sighed as he got up to clear their plates. Not sure how he forgets his own clothes. The first thing he does is put on the stupid hat and runs out, as if that's all he needs to wear. It's to the point that most of the crew carries clothes and towels on bath days. Luya, Law turned to Luffy. You do understand that dresses are for girls, right? You're a boy. You shouldn't be wearing a dress. They are. Luffy tilted his head. But I like them. I can't wear them anymore. There was a pause as Law looked into Luffy's watery eyes and sighed. Never mind. I was lying. You can still wear them. Luffy let out a cheer as Ace and Sabo chuckled at him. It's hard to say no to him, isn't it? They both said. Ace then let out a sigh as Sabo glared at the two dead men. Lou, could you bury those guys or maybe toss them somewhere far from here? We're going to wash the dishes. Luffy bounced up to grab the two bodies up to their ship. I'm gonna feed the big fish. He put out the fire for us. I would love an explanation for that also, he said, pointing to Luffy's retreating back. They looked at him with wary expression. Help us cover that up. Sabo waved at the blood-stained ground and finished the dishes. He's so clueless as to what is going on around him until that happens. It's like half the time his mind doesn't even register that he's danger. But if he's being used against us, that's when he snaps. It's what they used to do. They punish Lou in order to punish us. We try to protect him, and they punish him. We mess up on our assignments, and they punish him. It was always him. And Lou knows it hurts us even though he's the one in physical pain, Sabo said with a heavy sigh. Law was silent as they set about to finish the dishes after they were sure the blood was no longer visible, unsure where this was all going. And then Ace resumed talking. You know, we thought he was just some annoying brat they dropped on us at first. But he grew on us, and we couldn't help but to want to protect him. Raise the kid, they told us. How did they expect us to raise a kid when we were kids ourselves? We could barely take care of ourselves, let alone a crybaby. When they first sent the toddler out on a mission with us, we thought we were doing the kid a favor and protected him from everything. Of course, when things got rough, he saved our asses. I still remember that day. There were too many of them, and we were surrounded. Then Luffy jumped right in front of us and bit a man's hand and stole his gun. We didn't do much but watch that whole battle. He didn't even need us to back him up. He just went around gunning them one after the other, never wasting a bullet. After emptying the pistol, he picked up a sword from a dead body. Sabo shuddered. We don't know what Doflamingo did to him, but Luffy's able to imitate any fighting style he's seen. It doesn't matter if it's sword, gun, or hand-to-hand, he can imitate them after watching them use it once. He wasn't good with hand-to-hand until recently because he had no muscles to back it up. But he was good at imitating the moves, and he never misses with a gun. Ace looked at Law with a strained grin. Do you understand yet? Joker ya wants Luya, Law surmised after he thought about what he's heard. That's right, Sabo nodded as he rinsed his stack of dishes. You have nothing to fear of those monsters you talked about to come after you, because we're finally free. After hearing all that, are you scared? Of us? Of Lou? No, though I'm curious as to Luya's ability, Law said thoughtfully. Lucky you, Ace softly. He scares us. We've known him since he was tiny, but he scares us. Not scared that he'd do anything to us, but scared that we wouldn't be strong enough to stop him if we have to. Sabo placed a hand on Ace's should in comfort. That's why we have to get stronger. Strong enough to stop him if he should ever need us to. Everything we've told you, only Whitebeard and the commanders know. No one else knows. Everyone else just thinks that Luffy is a talented kid. Most of the crew knows we were once slaves. And that's it. It's what I like about this crew. They don't ask questions. You know, Law said after they finished and sat around waiting for Luffy. Everyone's going to think you two did this. He gestured to the burned island. The two boys moaned just as Luffy sailed back, acting as if nothing had ever happened. Upon seeing the island where they left the 4 teens, Marco heaved a sigh and covered his eyes with his hand in exasperation. Meanwhile, behind him, the rest of the crew were laughing and making bets as to how the beautiful lush, green island became a lump of charred sand and dirt with burned-down stumps. By the sounds of it, it wasn't much of a bet. Everyone had already assumed Ace and Sabo burned the place down while practicing a new attack or something involving the two. They had originally planned to call the boys over the Den Mushy and have them come back to the ship on their own, but Whitebeard decided to just teeter back around pick them up. Now, Marco wished they'd just call the brats back so he didn't have to see the destruction. He could see the kids in the distance standing at the beach. Only one seemed excited to see them. He could easily identify each of his kids. Luffy, bouncing up and down, while waving both of his arms around. Ace, looking grumpy with his arms crossed. Sabo, the only blonde of the group, crouched on the sandy beach with his hands in his hair. And Law, the tallest of the 4, holding onto Luffy's straw hat that the kid probably didn't realize he dropped, smirking. That's right. Marco has already decided in his mind that Law was one of his children. Not that he's going to tell anyone. And if Law decides to call him Pops too, he's not going to argue it. He highly doubt the oldest teen would call him Pops, though. Moby Dick anchored a distance away, coming as close as they could without getting beached. The boys knew they couldn't bring the ship any closer, so Marco wondered why they were taking their time getting on their boat and coming back. Marco crossed his arms as the boys made their way up to the deck after docking their boat back inside the larger ship. Well, yoy, Marco asked the 2 flame users amidst a chuckling crew. It wasn't our fault. They both answered, Ace with a scowl and Sabo with a pleasant smile. Marco raised an eyebrow, waiting for an explanation. You see, Sabo started. There were these two nobles that got washed ashore on the other side of the island this morning. They were on a cruise ship, Ace helped explain. Law stood by, smirking as he listened to the two take turns, desperately trying to explain how the island burned and how it wasn't their fault. Luffy latched himself onto Marco the minute he saw his pops. Apparently, the cruise ship capsized or something in a storm, and that's how they got on the island. They got this stupid idea to start a fire to signal somebody or something. It somehow got out of control, and Luffy saved them. His dress caught on fire, so he had to take it off. Law found out Luffy's a boy. We saw a lot of smoke coming from the island, so we turned our ship back to the island. We were just getting off the ship from fishing, and see Luffy and Trow running out of the forest. Wait. Thatch held up a hand to stop them from continuing. You two were out fishing while all that was happening. The two nodded. Okay, continue. Anyway, stop laughing. You're not helping, Sabo said to Law. I'm not laughing, but please do continue with your story. Law gave him an amused grin. Sabo scowled at him. Anyway, Luffy was carrying the two idiot nobles and told us to get back on the ship. We had to take our ship out to sea to get away from the fire. All the fish we caught burned with the island. Luffy fired a cannonball right in the ocean. A sea king came out. Luffy told it to put out the fire. And that's how the island burned, they both concluded. It's true. They insisted at Marco's look of disbelief. And where are these two nobles Yoi? Marco asked skeptically. Dead, Sabo huffed with his arms crossed and looked away. They threatened us, Ace growled. The body, Whitebeard grinned. He and the rest of them didn't believe what sounded like a tall tale. I fed it to the Sea King for helping us put out the fire, Luffy said, smiling happily. He then unlatched himself from Marco to go to the side of the ship and looked over the rail and released a small amount of haki. A large Sea King came up with a lump on its head, looking completely cowed. Everyone, including Marco and Whitebeard, dropped their jaws in shock, realizing the two boys had most likely told the truth. Told you so, Ace and Sabo said with their arms behind their heads before following their two brothers down to their room. So Law finally found out Luffy's not a girl, Vista managed to say. Marco only managed to heave a loud sigh and look to Whitebeard. I give up. I don't understand those kids Yoi. How can anyone get into so much trouble without lifting a finger? Divided by. Almost a year later, the four boys were under the ship doing their own things. Sabo tinkering away on a new project. Ace listening to Luffy reading a children's book. Ace and Sabo invited Law to move in with them after they came back from the island. Knowing that the older team didn't hate them and weren't afraid of them after telling him everything, they decided that he's now one of them. Actually, they didn't give him a choice and moved his things for him. Luffy trailed off in his reading and sat still for a moment, as if listening for something. The others followed suit, straining their ears to hear what their brother heard. All they can hear is the usual commotion from the upper level. Shanks, Luffy whispered before he cheered louder. Shanks is coming. Shanks is almost here. They followed him in his rush to get upstairs and to the figurehead. Law's been with them for a year already, and this is the first time he'd be meeting another Yonko besides Whitebeard. He could tell Lou was excited as he fidgeted where he sat on the figurehead and stared straight ahead, waiting to see Red Force. The boys' excitement was contagious as the rest of the ship readied themselves for the red hair pirates. All that chanting from him was all the warning they needed of the approaching ship. Once the pirate ship was close enough, the three older boys panicked when Luffy stretched his arms to reach the rails of the other ship. The three of them grabbed hold of him to stop him, only to be flung across the sea and land in a lump of tangled limbs on the other deck. Once Law was able to stop the spinning in his head and his vision cleared, he tensed up when he noticed a group of unknown me surround them. He glared at them as one took a step closer. Then something under him moved, causing him to grunt and the other two to moan in pain. Luffy's head finally made it out from under the three of them. He looked up at the crowd and smiled at them. Hi, he giggled. I'm stuck. We all are. No thanks to you, Ace groaned, his head sticking out in a corner under Law. Trow, move, came Sabo's muffled protest. His head was nowhere in sight, with only his feet peeking out from under Luffy's stretched out head. Your sword is somewhere unpleasant, and Ace, you're heavy, Sabo squawked when Law rolled himself off the pile into the side, pulling his sword along with him. Once they were free, Luffy ran over to one of men and gave him a hug. Ben, where's Shanks? The man pointed towards the cabin, nursing another hangover. Why don't you go wake him up, kid? Luffy cheered and ran towards where he knew the captain's room was. Who's this? The tall man with long gray hair, Ben, asked the boys. Our new brother, Sabo said. Trafalgar Law greeted them before they heard the unmistakable crying of Luffy. He placed his hand over the hilt of his sword and glared at the cabin door. Your captain better not have done anything to Lou, he growled as the two other brothers looked like they wanted run to check on their youngest brother. He must have seen the captain's new scar, Ben laughed, unworried. They all turned their head to the cabin door when they heard laughing. Law watched as the red-haired captain emerged with Luffy in his arm. Shanks laughing at the boy. I'm fine. Really, look, it's already healed. Luffy only sniffed as he nodded, having been calmed down. It's good to see you two again, Shanks greeted the boys as he set Luffy down. You three sure have grown. 16 now. The boys grinned in answer. Who's this? Trow. Luffy hugged Law, trapping both his arms. Trafalgar Law, he corrected the boy. Shanks hummed as he looked at Law. Can't believe the old man took on another kid. I'm not a kid, Law protested. I'm 18. Shanks laughed and patted him on the head. Still a kid to me. What happened? Ace said, looking at the scar that went across the man's left eye. I'll tell you later, Shanks winked at them. Once they all boarded Moby, Marco grabbed Luffy by the scuff of Ace's old t-shirt. Don't you ever dare do that again, Yoy. You scared the shit out of us. What if you fell in the sea? Not one of you can swim. Or did you forget that, Yoy? Yelled at the boy. Awa, but Pops, Luffy whined. No buts. You would have seen Akagami without having to pull that stunt, Yoy. I don't think reprimanding him is going to work. Sabo sighed in defeat, knowing that Luffy will just do what he wants. Law grunted when Marco carelessly tossed Luffy to him. My sister is a heart attack waiting to happen. He repeated what Haruta first told him. They told me Luffy was a boy, Shanks said as he studied the boy in Law's arm. He is, but my first impression was him in a dress, and they got the whole ship to prank me into thinking Luya was a girl for a good 2 weeks, Law explained. Therefore, Luya is my sister. He doesn't seem to mind. A walking heart attack, huh? I think it fits him perfectly, Shanks laughed. You have Haruta to thank for that. Law put Luffy down. The boy had grown, but he still was light. That was the first thing they told me about him. Pretty accurate, I'd say. Why are you here? Marco crossed his arms as he asked tiredly, even though he eyed the man's scared eye. It's not the boy's birthday. And you've already missed a few, Yoy. To see your captain, of course, Shanks answered cheerfully, before his arm was tugged by Luffy. Shanks, look. Luffy placed his hat over his head and tugged the back of his shirt down so the man could look at his back. In between his shoulder blades was their ASL symbol, the size of an average person's palm. Ace drew it. I'm going to get a tattoo like that. Shanks looked at the drawing before laughing. That strange wanted poster was you three. Of course, why didn't I realize it before? You have to tell me the story behind that raid on the Marine base. First, let me talk to your grandpops, okay? As soon as he greeted the ship's captain, Shanks took a seat on the deck in front of the large man and started talking. He told them of his encounter with Blackbeard Teach, how the man used his Shichibukai title to enter Impel Down and freed some of the level 6 prisoners to be in his crew. That information was never released to the public. It was something he learned from Garp through an encrypted message, since Garp is no longer free to sail about as he pleased since he's now put in charge of training new recruits. The government had taken away the trader's title after that stint. Now his bounty is set at 300 million bully. Since then, Blackbeard has been going around terrorizing islands and rookie pirates. It was on one of those islands that Shanks crossed his path, and that was how he got the scars over his eye. Shanks wanted to warn Whitebeard and his crew of how dangerous Teach has gotten. I don't know how strong he was when he sailed under you, but with his new ability from the devil fruit he stole, he's a dangerous man, Shanks told them. Yami no Mai is truly fearsome, even more so against a devil fruit user. He can nullify the person's ability when he touches them, rendering their ability useless. He can even absorb an attack. I've seen him suck in a small town into a black hole and spit it back out completely destroyed. Luffy, Marco looked at the boy sitting on the red hare's lap. What did you think of Teach's strength when he was here, Yoy? Strong, Luffy answered as he tilted his head. Very strong. Like Thatch and Jazu. Marco nodded in understanding. So as strong as a commander. And he somehow hid his strength from us. And this was before the devil fruit, Yoy. Dangerous indeed, Whitebeard said to himself before talking to everyone there. We will fight if we have to, but we will avoid him if we can for the time being. After we get more information, we can make plans, but for now, we will leave him. Shanks nodded gratefully. While he may be confident that Whitebeard can take on Teach, but with his slowly deteriorating health, he didn't want to risk losing Whitebeard. Losing one Yonko could just throw the seas into chaos, especially with how much power Whitebeard hold. If they lose the man, so many islands would be in danger. That's just something the world cannot afford, no matter what the government thinks. He just hopes the one IV the older man is set up on won't turn to 2 or 3 anytime soon. Oh yeah, I was wondering if I could spend some time with the boys. You know, with how many birthdays I missed, I kind of want to make it up, the red-haired Yonko said. Whitebeard laughed as the tension in the air disappeared. Only if they agree. What did you have in mind? Actually, I was hoping to have them on my ship for a few weeks and maybe stop by an island, just to take them out and stuff. That sounds interesting, Sabo said, looking to their captain. We've only met bad pirates before you, grandpops. I'd like to spend some time with another peaceful pirate. Luffy cheered, while both Ace and Law looked skeptical. It was one thing with this crew. Who knows more about their youngest brother? It's another thing with another who's never actually seen their brother in action. They worried what the other Yonko would think if anything should happen. Sabo was also worried about the same thing, but he thought it'd be a good thing for Luffy to learn more about life outside of Whitebeard. He was only thinking about broadening Luffy's experience, especially if his brother wants to be a pirate king. That means leaving them one day, and he wants to make sure Luffy would be prepared for anything and everything. The first thing he's going to have to learn is to be around people that aren't part of their ridiculously huge family. Sure, Luffy likes Shanks, but he rarely interacted with the rest of the Red Hair crew other than Ben. Sabo will talk to the other two about it when they get a chance. They were lucky he was attached to Law before he became part of the family, but that could be because Luffy could tell that Law was like them, wanting to be free from his tormentor. If those three are going, then so am I, Law said with determination. He turned to look at his captain. I'll make sure they don't cause too much trouble. I've already learned what I can from Kobato, so I can also double as their temporary doctor. I'm going to Yoi. Marco crossed his arms. The last time we left the four of you alone, you burned down an entire island. Not our fault, both fire users yelled. And that makes it worse, Yoi, Marco deadpanned. Then maybe I should go too. Haruta said. Law complained about not having anyone that could swim with them that time. Me too, Thatch offered. Someone has to feed these brats right. More of the commanders joined in with excuses of wanting to go with the boys, which then in turn caused the rest of the crew to make up excuses for wanting to go. And the next thing we know, we'll have all of Whitebeard pirates on our ship, Ben huffed. Whitebeard laughed. Only Marco goes. They have plenty of non-users on their ship. They'll be fine. Thatch, give their cook a rundown on what the boys need. That should suffice. The large man turned to Shanks with a twinkle in his eyes. As you can see, if you let anything happen to the boys, you'll have the whole crew on you. Shanks laughed it off. What could possibly happen? I'll be with them the whole time. They'll be fine. That's what you think, Izo muttered under his breath. Everyone near him that heard shook their head in exasperation. They know of all the troubles the boys have gotten into. It wasn't just the Marine base that gave the boys their first bounty. The trio and Law had a few other run-ins with the Marines and a few other pirates that caused the ASL bounty to go up since then. They were all packed and ready to board Red Force by evening. It was already late by the time the ships separated. The boys and Marco were shown to their rooms so they could turn in for the night. Ace and Sabo shared a room across from Law and Luffy, while Marco had the room next to theirs. Ben had to explain to a complaining Sabo that Red Force doesn't have a bed big enough for them to sleep together on, nor a room big enough for that kind of bed. An hour later, Luffy walked over to Law's bed with his pillow hugged tightly against his chest. Trell, what? Law turned to look at his sister. My bed is cold, Luffy whined. Yeah, mine too. Law got up and gathered his pillow and blanket before taking Luffy by the hand and led him to the room across from theirs. He opened the door slowly as to not wake the two inside, and they both slipped in. As soon as Luffy found his other two brothers huddled together on the floor, he quietly lifted their shared blanket and snuggled in between them. The two sleeping forms unconsciously made room for him, while Law took his place next to Ace. After being invited to the trio's safe haven below Moby Dick, he felt more comfortable sleeping with them than being alone. After being alone for so long, it was a nice feeling to be with others, even though he had no memories of ever sleeping in the same room as someone else, not even with his sister when he lived with his parents. It was something he regretted after spending time with Luffy and his brothers. Marco smiled softly at the image upon opening the door the next morning. Luffy had ended up sprawled out with his head on Sabo's stomach and his legs over Ace and Law. He could tell from their expression that the older three weren't comfortable. Shanks scratched his head in confusion next to Marco. Well, I guess we could move 3 beds together, or something. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy share a hammock, Marco said. They've slept together for as long as Luffy can remember. Yoi. Law has one set up right next to them. They may be teenagers, but I don't think the trio will ever outgrow this. Yoi. Law stirred and blearily opened his eyes, looking towards the adults. He shoved Luffy's leg off him and sat up to stretch. It's more comfortable this way, he said sleepily as he scratched his head. I don't see how the floor is comfortable, Shanks said amused. Not the floor, but I've slept on worse. Law went to shake Ace. So has the other 3, Marco muttered, remembering the cell where they first met. 5 more minutes, Sabo. Ace waved Law's hands away. I'm not Sabo yet, and it's time to wake up, Law said as he worked to pick a limp Luffy up and nudged his foot at Sabo. Sabo, ya, wake up, and wake Ace up too. I'm taking Luya. He carried his sister past the 2 adults and towards the bathroom to get the kids started on their morning ritual. Sabo rolled over on his stomach and poked Ace's face. Ass, wake up, he said tiredly. His brother just groaned and rolled in the other direction. If you don't hurry, Lou's gonna eat all our breakfast. That got the dark-haired brother to get up and run out the door and past Marco and Shanks. Save me some food too, Sabo called out tiredly, before falling back into his pillow. Is this normal? Shanks asked Marco. Marco shrugged. Never seen them wake up before. They sleep in their hideout under the ship. He walked over to Sabo get him to wake up properly. It took the 4 of them only 10 minutes to join the rest of the Red Force in the galley. Not one of them looking as tired as they did when they woke up. We should make you brats sleep in your room more often, Yoy. Marco gave them a sleepy grin. Why? Sabo asked as he took a seat next to the man. Watching you 4 waking up is entertaining, Shanks said from in front of him. Oh yeah, Ace turned to Law. What were you guys doing in our room? What were you 2 doing sleeping on the floor? Was Law's nonchalant answer. Leah said his bed was cold. I agreed with him. So we went where it's warmer. Oh, what are you wearing today, kid? Ben asked as he took a seat next to his captain. Luffy stood up on his bench to show off his new dress. Trow gave it to me. It's pretty, and look, he pointed to his new hair accessory. A small clip with a simple flower. Another one. Sabo peered at it. This is the 3rd one Law has bought for the boy. The other 2 were carefully clipped to the red ribbon on his straw hat. Bought it a while ago but forgot about it. Found it in my bag this morning. You 3 spoil him too much, Yoy, Marco said. Not as much as the moronic duo. Law pointed his fork at Ace and Sabo. Hey, they both yelled. Oh, so you like Jazuya's name better? Bro con can buy. The 2 growled at Law, while Luffy giggled at them. I think it's cute, Shanks said with his head on his hand. Luffy's a lucky kid to have you 3 as dotting brothers. It's not just those 3, Marco moaned. The whole ship, Yoy. It's the whole damn ship. You should see bath day. Everyone has clothes ready for when the kid runs out of the bath. Most of the crew bought clothes for him, Yoy. Bath day caught the entire Red Hair Pirates by surprise. They really weren't sure what to expect when they first heard about how Bath Day went on Moby Dick. Really, they thought the 5 Whitebeard pirates were just joking with them. They found out how wrong they were when Luffy streaked across the deck of Red Force wearing nothing but his straw hat on his head. Marco was ready though. He held open a large towel, ready for the boy to run into his arms for a hug. The 1st Division commander went on to dry the giggling boy off once he was in his arms. Shanks shook his head. You guys weren't joking, were you? He really does come running out with nothing on. The other 3 boys ran over to Luffy a few moments later with various clothes in their arms. Luffy, Sabo whined tiredly. You forgot your clothes again. We're not home. You really shouldn't do that. Just imagine him doing that in town. Law grinned as he handed Marco Luffy's underwear. Ace paled at that thought. No bath in town. We're never going to do that. Who knows what kind of people are out there. Yasop laughed at them. You boys seriously suck at this whole bathing kids thing. Though, he's not a kid anymore, he mused as he eyed Luffy. You should teach him to bath himself. What is he going to do once he goes off on his own? The trio glared at him, all with tired expression. Why don't you try it? Ace and Sabo challenged. Oh, that's a great idea, Law said. Let's make a bet out of it. I bet you can't get Luya dried before she leaves the bathroom. To make it easier, you can have as many people as you want to help, Sabo said. Deal, Yasop grinned. How hard could it be to get the kid dried and dressed? His wife does it all the time, and he's never heard her complain about it. They found out 2 days later. Yasop roped Lucky and Ben to help. The end result was the same as usual. Luffy running across the deck, sopping wet with nothing but his hat. The trio and Marco laughed at the 3 red hair pirates when they walked out of the bathroom soaking wet and panting as if they had ran a marathon. How the hell do you do it? He doesn't even stay still in there. Bathing the kid is like a workout on its own, Yasop complained. Practice, Law, Ace, and Sabo said. It's a lot easier now with Trow helping us, Sabo said. Yeah, before, we couldn't even finish his bath, and he'd run out with shampoo still in his hair, Ace said. So, how did he manage to leave with nothing on? Shanks said as he tried to hold back a laugh. The first thing the damn brat did was put on his hat and declared he was dressed and ran off before we could stop him. Ben sat his soggy self down and leaned his back on the rail. Why are you in a hurry to leave the bathroom anyway? Yasop asked. To play, Luffy stated as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. You guys win. What do you want? Yasop sighed in defeat. A new dress for Luya, Law said. New shoes for Luffy, Ace said. Lu needs new books, Sabo said. What? I'm not letting my brother grow up stupid, he added at the looks the others gave him. I think you guys should be called the moronic trio, rather than a duo. All you guys think about is the shrimp, Rockstar laughed as he walked past the group. After breakfast the next day Marco found the boys one Luffy short. Where's Luffy Yoy? No idea. Both Ace and Sabo shrugged before turning their attention back to their card game. Rockstar said he wanted to teach Luya he shouldn't run around without his clothes, Law said. Not a moment later, Rockstar slammed open the cabin door, causing everyone on deck to look his direction. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Midget Marco. He stepped aside to show Luffy standing behind him. There was a pause before a roar of laughter erupted. Oh my god, is that your clothes? Sabo said in between laughs. How did they get his hair like that? Ace laughed from beside Sabo. Law chucked. They do say imitation is a form of flattery. Marco's eye twitched in annoyance. Those were his clothes. He couldn't believe they actually went through his things and altered his clothes. Pops, Luffy ran up to him. I look like you. I see that yoy, Marco bit out. Why are you wearing my clothes? And how did teaching him the importance of wearing clothes turn into this? He looked to Rockstar, who managed to look sheepish. Actually, I have no idea. 1 minute we were having a serious conversation. It was a serious one-side conversation. I don't think he understood anything I said. Then he gets up all serious-like and walks away. I followed, and he led me to your room. I look in and there he was, rummaging through your things. He just started stripping right there and then. He needed help putting the clothes on, so I helped. I even made it fit with rubber bands and some pins. He didn't look right, so I fixed his hair too. I kid you not. I have no idea how the lecture of wearing clothes turned into this. He looks happy about it at least. Luffy, why are you wearing my clothes, yoy? Marco asked again. Luffy tilted his head and thought. Rockstar was talking about clothes. It was boring, and I didn't understand what he was saying. Something about bad men wearing clothes. Then I remembered your scarf belt. I really like your scarf belt. And then Rockstar helped me look like you. Marco looked at the kid in confusion, trying to find the connection between his belt and perverts, before giving up. There is no understanding how the kid's brain worked. So, what do you think? Shanks asked as an island came to view the next morning. Law, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy looked at the small village that greeted them. The harbor held many fishing boats with fishermen unloading the day's haul. Behind that was a small bar with a large sign over the door, announcing its name, Party Bar. Lining the streets were more shops of various types and what looked like homes further on down. Looks homey, Law said. It's an island. What do you want us to think? Ace asked, confused. Shanks's smile dropped. What? I heard you two were from Dawn Island in East Blue. This doesn't look familiar. Sorry, Shanks, but Ace and I lived with mountain bandits and only went to Goa to cause trouble. I don't remember seeing any village like this on Dawn, Sabo explained. Oh, Shanks said dejectedly. Ben came over and placed a comforting hand over his captain's shoulder. When we were sailing around East Blue, we frequented a place on Dawn Island called Fusha Village on and off for about a year. Captain liked it so much that he had this uninhabited island modeled after Fusha. All the villagers you see are former slaves that we happened upon. Shanks wanted to show you a little piece of home. Fusha. Both Ace and Sabo's face lit up. Makino was from Fusha, right? Ace asked Sabo. You two know Makino? Shanks asked, getting over his depression. Yeah, she and Daden were friends, surprisingly, and would sometimes visit and give us clothes, Sabo said. The mayor came with her because he didn't trust the bandits. They're the only ones we know from Fusha. And Gramps. We've never been to village itself though. Ace rubbed his hand through the back of his hair. I wasn't allowed anywhere near people. Gray Terminal didn't count for some reason. Though we did sneak into Lowtown to turn things in for cash and wreak havoc just because. Thanks for trying. Sabo tried. Shanks waved his hand dismissively. Meh, I brought you to an island. Explore all you want. You never know, you might like it here. Before they even reached the pier and anchor, they could already see and hear the villagers gathering and cheering at the sight of their ship. Very popular, Law commented. Like I said, we're their heroes, even though we weren't really trying to save them. The ship they were on just happened to attack us, Ben said proudly as the rest of the Red Force crew gathered on deck, ready to disembark. The Whitebeard pirates followed Shanks down the plank. Once they all set foot on the island, they were surrounded by people of all ages. Luffy, being the smallest and the youngest, was surrounded by Law, Ace, and Sabo so that he doesn't get jostled by the crowd. Law looked behind him when he felt someone grab his sleeve. He looked down to see Luffy looking at the people nervously. Law nudged Sabo and gestured with his head towards Luffy. Understanding what was going on, Sabo pulled Luffy and Ace to slip away from the crowd. Law stayed in order to inform Marco and Shanks that the trio didn't just up and disappear. You okay there, Luffy? Sabo asked once they were a good distance away from the crowd and walking down the dirt road of the village. The boy nodded and gave both of them a bright, excited smile. Yeah, there was a lot of very happy people. It made me feel, I don't know, tingly. It was a good feeling. Just too much. Ace and Sabo didn't quite understand what he meant, so they just ruffled his hair, relieved that he wasn't feeling afraid of the crowd. They decided to go ahead and tour the village without waiting for everyone else. Once the crowd diminished, Marco looked around him and noticed the three missing. Shit, where'd those kids go, yoy? He asked Law. Luffy looked nervous, so Sabo took him and Ace, and I guess, walked through town. How long ago? Law narrowed his eyes at Marco's worried look. About a minute or two after we got off the ship. Why? What's wrong? Shanks interrupted them. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy went off on their own, yoy. Marco groaned with his hand over his eyes. So, this island is safe. There's no need to worry about them, Shanks laughed. You don't understand. The blonde moved his hand to his forehead and swiped his hair back. It's either they find trouble, or trouble finds them. How do you think their bounty keeps going up when they're sailing with us? They're lucky they haven't been caught yet. They even managed to burn down an island without doing it themselves. Law's eyes widened in realization before smacking his hand to his face. How could he forget? Shit, they have about a 30-minute head start. We have to. Before he could finish his sentence, they heard Sabo cry out in pain, followed closely by Ace's voice. Now that they know which direction to look for the boys, they ran as fast as they could and saw Luffy on the ground, unmoving with some white powdery substance on his face, and Sabo rubbing his teary eyes, trying to get the same powdery substance out. Let go of me, damn it, Ace said to a boy that was dragging him away from his brothers. Getting fed up with struggling with the persistent boy, he proceeded to punch him once, sending him to unconsciousness. Leaving the boy laying on the ground, he crouched down next to Luffy and shook him. Luffy, you okay there? Come on, say something. What happened? Marco demanded once they reached them. My eyes, Sabo wailed with tears streaming down his face. I don't know, Ace answered, still trying to shake Luffy awake. We were just walking, and that kid, he jerked a thumb behind him, came up and threw something at Sabo and Luffy, then tried to drag me away. Law crouched down to take a look at Luffy. The young teen was barely breathing. He swiped a finger through the powder and sniffed it before taking a small lick and finched. It's a very potent sedative. We need to flush Sabo's eyes very thoroughly and take Lu back to the ship. All my supplies are there, and hopefully, Shanks' infirmary is well stocked. Shanks nodded that they were. It looks like he may have ingested some of it. We have to hurry. He picked up his sister and ran towards the ship, with Marco doing the same with Sabo. Ace followed with the unknown boy thrown over his shoulders. What? He asked when Shanks looked at him. He attacked us, and I want to know why. He's lucky I didn't fry him. He's not breathing, Law said worriedly, as he checked over Luffy once more in the infirmary with the ship's doctor. The doctor held a stethoscope to Luffy's chest and shook his head sadly. His heart stopped beating. Move. Law shoved the older man aside and pressed 2 thumbs on the boy's chest. Counter shock. He sent waves of electrical currents to the body, willing the heart to start once more. It didn't work. He tried again with no success. There was a pain groan from the next bed over, where their attacker was stirring. Ace wasted no time to grab this person's shirt and shake him awake. He didn't want to think about his baby brother being dead. There was no way Luffy was dead. Why the hell did you attack us? He yelled as he continued to shake the boy. What did we ever do to you? He continued to yell as he was being pulled off and held back by Marco. The boy shook in fear as he realized he's been caught. Shanks sat down calmly on the boy's bed just as Sabo walked in with Ben's help. How's Luffy? The room was silent, and all he could hear was someone sniffling. Ace, what's going on? I can't see. Is Luffy okay? Fear laced his voice. The quiet was unsettling. Guys, Law tried to answer, but his voice caught his throat. The doctor answered for him, but was cut off when there was gasp from Luffy's bed. He and Law quickly moved to check on their youngest brother. He's breathing. Law crumpled down to the floor next to the bed in relief. Lu is breathing again. Ace shook Marco off him and rushed to Luffy's bedside and lightly tapped his face to wake him up. Luffy, wake up. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder to stop him. With the amount he's ingested, it may take him a while to wake up again. Once he does, he may be disoriented, and he may not be able to move, hear, or see. It's temporary though. It's already a miracle that he's breathing again. He was dead for a good 5 minutes or so. Oh God, Sabo fell to the ground. Lu died, but he's okay now. He felt cold at the thought of almost losing his precious brother. Wait, disoriented? The doctor nodded, before he remembered Sabo couldn't see him. Yes, disoriented. Your loss of sight is also temporary. It should come back sometime tomorrow or the next day. What's wrong? Ace asked warily at Sabo's pale face, as he wiped away his tears. Trow, do you have the tranq gun with you? Sabo asked seriously. No, go get it. We might need it. How disoriented will he be? With how much that's gotten into his system? Very, the doctor answered, but he shouldn't be able to move around, so a tranquilizer will be unnecessary. Ace understood what Sabo was thinking. This is Luffy we're talking about. Better safe than sorry, especially if he can't see and doesn't know where he is once he wakes up. So, care to explain Yoi? Marco asked of the boy in the other bed. Everyone else had forgotten about him once they found out Luffy was still alive. Hey, don't be scared, Shanks offered gently when the boy didn't answer and continued to shake in fear. We're not going to hurt you, says you, Ace growled. Ace, Marco warned. What's your name? Shanks asked, trying to warm up to the boy. Jeff, he finally answered. How old are you? 11. 11? Huh. Jeff, you seem like a good kid, so there must be a good reason for what you did, Shanks encouraged. I thought those two were nobles, he pointed to Sabo and Luffy, and I wanted to save him, he pointed to Ace, from them. I didn't mean to hurt them. I saw this bag of powder in a pile of trash, and I thought it would just distracted them enough for us to run away. Tears streamed down his eyes once the situation finally hit him. He knew he was in trouble. These were pirates. Sure, they were pirates that saved him along with the others, but pirates are pirates. Not to mention he recognized the tattoo on the other man as Whitebeard's. It's not just one big-name pirate he was dealing with. What made you think those two are nobles? From what I've heard from their grandpa, their background is quite similar to yours, Shanks said amused. Their clothes, Jeff said meekly. He's got you there, Ace said with a weak laugh. Sabo huffed from his position on the floor near the door. Nobles wouldn't be caught dead in these clothes. Too casual. You wouldn't believe how many times my real dad went through my closet and burned my favorite clothes. I will not let my son wear something that will tarnish our good name, he would say. Good thing I'm not his son anymore. Nobles are hypocrites. Oh, so you used to be a noble? Shanks asked. Garp didn't mention anything about that. Just said you were his grandson. Yeah, I ran away from home because I didn't agree with how the nobles view human lives. Just because someone wasn't born a noble doesn't mean they're trash or tools to be used. Even being born a noble, children are used to further pursue the adult's reputation. I just wanted my own freedom. Gramps never asked anything. To him, I just showed up one day at Dadden's, and he just adopted me without a question. It was like I've been there the whole time, Sabo said with a fond smile. Ace snorted. Ironic, really. You went from filthy rich to dirt poor to slave in a matter of a year. You were a slave, Jeff asked, finally feeling safe enough that the pirates wouldn't kill him. Like Shanks said, our situation is quite similar, Sabo said with a frown. But our story is a little more violent. Story time later, Yoy. Marco suddenly cut in. Shanks, take that kid, Sabo, and the doctor to a different room. Somewhere safe and away from here, Yoy. Looks like Luffy might wake up a little earlier than we think. I just saw his fingers twitch. Shanks laughed. You too, Marco. Seriously, how dangerous could one midget be? He's just a cute little kid. Sorry to burst your bubble, Shanks, Ace said as he helped Sabo up, but like Sabo just said, our story is a little violent. You're the captain of this ship, so your life is our priority. Not to mention, Luffy is our problem. Sabo can't see, so take care of him for us. Also, Pops, Sabo turned his head to face the room, not really knowing where the other blonde was. Yeah, be careful. Because, while Sabo wasn't worried about Marco hurting Luffy, he was still worried about his father figure. Marco nodded before the door closed, leaving him, Law, Ace, and Ben in the infirmary with Luffy. Mind explaining? Ben asked. I'm with Shanks. There's no way this brat is that dangerous. There was this one time, back when we were still a slave, the people there drugged him and brought him back to our cell out cold. He woke up and tried to kill us because he was hungry. He didn't recognize us. He killed the 3 guards that came to stop him. I'm not sure how we did it, but Sabo and I somehow knocked him out. We came out of it badly hurt. When he woke up, he didn't remember anything. He was only 3. If you want to know what you're dealing with, Image fighting all 16 commanders at the same time, Ace explained. Okay, maybe that's exaggerating but close enough. Is that why you have that trank gun, Yoy? Marco asked. No, I asked Sabo for one. The next person to laugh at my narcolepsy will be sleeping in their dinner, Ace blushed. Trow just accidentally brought it with him and noticed it in his bag a few days ago. You've never seen him fight, Law said, taking away the small knife and pistol from Luffy's holsters. He may be scrawny, but he knows what he's doing. You're kidding, Ben said disbelievingly. They're not. We trained him, so we know what he's capable of, Yoy, Marco answered. Ben remained quiet, waiting until later when he's with his captain to ask more questions. For now, he'll have to see firsthand. It was only 5 minutes later when Luffy stirred. He slowly opened his eyes and blinked a few times, looking confused. Luffy, Ace said from beside the bed. He reached his hand over to place his hand over his brother's head, only to be slapped aside. Luffy quickly moved to the corner of the bed and moved his head side to side, trying to figure out why he couldn't see anything, and why he couldn't recognize any of the lights in the room. His head hurt so much that he couldn't think straight. The only thing he could think of were of his brothers. Where are they? Are they all right? What happened? Why was everything so quiet and dark and fuzzy? Ace, Sabo, he tried to call out, but no sound came from his mouth. Luya, it's okay. Calm down, Law tried. He was pushed down when he approached the bed. I don't think he can hear you, Yoy. Remember what the doctor said, Yoy? Marco said as he pushed himself off Law. He reached out to grab Luffy's arm when the boy tried to dash out of the infirmary, only to be bitten on the hand and punched in the face. I thought no one could touch you, Ben said in surprise as he too tried to catch Luffy. He was kicked out of the way, into the door, and out in the hall. Hacky, was all Marco said as he wiped the blood from his lip where blue, gold flames erupted to heal his cut and chased the boy with Law and Ace on his tail. What the hell happened? Shanks demanded. He and Jeff ran out to see what the commotion was, ignoring Sabo's protest. I thought Doc said he wouldn't be able to move for a while. We may have a bit of a problem, Captain, Ben said. The kid's fast. It's been confirmed, Yoy. Marco panted when Ben finally joined them on deck, where Ace was fighting Luffy with a broken mop handle and Law with his long sword still in its sheath. He can't see either. He tripped all over everything in his way. He's using Haki to see people though yoy. How should we handle this? Ben asked with his hand over his shotgun. Attack with everything you got and hope you can knock him out yoy. We're either going to have to try to hit him the tranquilizer or knock him into the ocean yoy. With that, they both joined Ace and Law. Aren't you going to help them? Jeff asked Shanks, who just leaned on the wall and watched them fight. Nah, they've got it. But still, I can't believe that cute little kid can be this vicious, Shanks said seriously just as Luffy tripped over Ace's mop, only to kick Law in the chest as he righted himself in one fluid motion. That's why you have to be careful of kids too, not just the scary-looking guys. The two looked over to see Sabo carefully crawling up the stairs on his hands and knees. That's how we managed to kidnap Pops. Jeff went over to help the teen up and walk him over to where Shanks stood. Kidnap Marco. That Marco, the 1st Division commander and first mate of Whitebeard, Shanks asked in surprise and burst out laughing. Our last job with our old employer, Sabo smirked. Luffy was 7 and we were 10. Just imagine a cute little girl and her brothers doing a dine and dash, and you caught us red-handed. Marco chased us down. Now that I know him, I'm not sure if he wanted to turn us in and lecture us, or to make sure we had a place to return to. Anyway, Luffy distracted him while we knocked him out with a set of seastone cuffs. They wanted to use Marco as a hostage to take Whitebeard's head. Ops, don't tell Pops I told you. It's supposed to be our secret. Sabo blushed. Shanks laughed. So, all it takes is some defenseless kids to bring down Whitebeard's first mate's defense. Law was suddenly sent towards them, making a large hole in the cabin's wall. Where's the gun? Sabo asked. He kicked it out of my hand. Not sure where it went, Law grunted. He has various minor cuts here and there and a deep one on his shoulder. My sword got stolen. Then they watched as Lucky Roo walked up the plank while eating a piece of meat. He looked at the ongoing fight, turned his head to look at Shanks, then down to his feet where he almost stepped on a gun. Oh, nice timing, Lucky. Shoot the kid with that, would you? Shanks asked, pointing to the gun at his crew's feet. Lucky studied the fight for a moment before shrugging and held his meat between his teeth. He pulled out one of his own gun and fired before firing the trank gun in the direction Luffy dodged the first. Everyone fighting turned as one to look at Lucky in surprise at how effortlessly he took down the boy, then dropped to the deck in exhaustion. Jeff, go get Doc, would you? Looks like we have a few more people for him to patch up. I'll take Luffy back down to the infirmary. And Sabo, I would like an explanation as to how little Luffy is the way he is. Lucky ... You just do whatever you were doing. Shanks pushed off the wall and walked towards the exhausted group. Who the hell taught that kid Haki? Ben complained as he nursed a bruised arm. No one, Marco said tiredly. He just somehow picked it up one day. Must be nice to be able to heal yourself. Ace grumbled as he glared at Marco, who supported him since his leg had been kicked by Luffy. It's probably broken, he thought to himself as he winced when he put slight pressure on it. After everyone has been patched up and settled down, Ace and Sabo told their story, minus Ace's and Luffy's parentage or who their owner was. They didn't want unnecessary information leaked with Jeff being there. They were already lucky that Marines didn't have pictures for their wanted poster, especially with Doflamingo still wanting Luffy back. They just wanted to take precaution in case Jeff accidentally leaked something to the wrong person. So let me get this straight, Ben said. The 3 of you were slaves/assassins. Ace and Sabo nodded. But you two were only 11 when we first met, Shanks said in worried confusion. Weren't you kids too young to be going around killing people? They didn't think so, Ace and Sabo both said. And Luffy, Shanks yoy, Marco shook his head, telling the ship's captain to not ask any more. Just so you know, Jeff, you can't tell anyone about us. We don't want to go back, Sabo said. You just never know who would visit the island after all. Is that why Luffy insists that being the Pirate King equals being the freest person in the world? Shanks mused. Ace nodded solemnly. It's his dream, to be the person with the most freedom. That would explain why he likes to run around naked yoy, Marco smirked, causing everyone to laugh. Luffy didn't wake until early the next morning. When he did, he found that everything was dark. Too dark. He made a noise of confusion. There was a slight sound of movement to his right. He turned his head but couldn't make an outline of anyone, but he knew who it was. Trow, what happened? I can't see, he whined. My throat hurts. Oh good, you're coherent, Law said in relief, putting down the trank gun that he had been pointing at his sister with as a precaution. He held out a glass of water and guided it to Luffy's hands. What? Nothing, Law waved off, not in the mood to explain. He's tired from staying up most of the night, keeping an eye on Luffy. He and the red-hair pirate's doctor had been taking turns watching the boy. What's the last thing you remember? Luffy scrunched his face up in thought. Somebody threw something at me and Sabo. I thought it was that yummy sweet thing that Thatch likes to use on dessert. But it tasted yucky and it hurt my eyes. Then his face turned to Law as he just remembered something. How's Sabo and Ace? They're fine, probably still sleeping. It's still very early in the morning. It was just you and Sabo that were targeted, so Ace is unharmed. Sabo just lost his sight for the time being. His sight should come back sometime today. Yours should return soon too. You ended up getting the most of it due to your lack of height, Law explained. Okay, Luffy had sat up on the bed and kicked his feet back and forth as he listened to his brother. Ace caught him. Is that who's in Marco's room? Yes, Law said, unsurprised that Luffy knew. He and the other three already knew about Luffy's extraordinary observation haki. His lip twitched upward as he told his sister why the boy did what he did. So he's a good guy, Luffy stated. He just want to help Ace, even though Ace don't need help. That's right. I'm hungry. Law laughed at the grumble from Luffy's stomach. Let's get dressed and wake the others up. Luffy cheered and got up to run to his other brothers after being dressed by Law, only to slam into the infirmary's wall. Law just sighed and opened the door for him and held his hand to guide him through the hall. Ace and Sabo were the first to be woken up with Luffy jumping on their shared bed. Ace yelled in pain when Luffy accidentally jostled his bruised leg. Luckily it wasn't broken like he'd thought. Ace, are you okay? What happened? Luffy patted him all over. Ace managed to laugh it off and told him that it was just a prank gone wrong. He, Ben, and Law got a few small cuts, but they were fine. I gotta learn to not pull a prank without Sabo double-checking it. Law and Luffy left them to get ready and went to the room across to find that Marco was already awake and dressed. The man caught Luffy when the boy launched himself at him. Good to see you're awake. Luffy yoy, Marco ruffled his hair. Did I sleep long? I had a good nap, Luffy giggled. I think you slept most of the day yesterday yoy. Marco fumbled with the boy in his arm when Luffy decided to lean back and hang upside to look at the person standing next to them. Hi, what's your name? I'm Luffy. He reached out both hands to touch the other person's face. I'm Jeff, he answered nervously. He was afraid of this boy. The kid was more dangerous than any of the older pirates on board. Trow told me you tried to save Ace, so don't be scared. You're a good person. Thank you. Huh, but I attacked you. I'm not a good person, he mumbled. No, you're a good person. I say so, Luffy said with conviction. Then he tilted his head with his hand still on Jeff's head. Hey, how old are you? You're taller than me, but you're still shorter than Ace and Sabo though. I'm 13. 13? You're short. Jeff couldn't help but shout. Really? Luffy confused him. First, he thanked him for attempting to save his brother that didn't need saving. Then, he says he's a good person, even though he was that one that attacked him and his brother. Now, he's saying he's older than him, even though Luffy only looked about 10 or so. And why are you wearing a dress? I am. Trow says I'm portable. Luffy smiled brightly. Dresses are pretty. Wonder what it looks like today. So, how old are you? He wound his arms around Jeff's neck, signaling to Marco to let go so he can hang off of the other boy's back. I'm 11. You're light, Jeff said in surprise. How can someone older than him be so small and light? Is this what happens to someone who became a slave at a young age? Then he realized what Luffy just said. You can't see. I'm hungry, Luffy said. Why are you hanging off me? Jeff asked uncomfortably as they walked up to the deck. Because I want to. Marco laughed. It's because he can't see inanimate objects yoy. He might just end up tripping over something. He ran into the wall earlier, Law said. At least it's only temporary. Oh, I know, Luffy exclaimed. Jeff lives on this island, right? Can you take us on a tour? But you can't see. It's okay. I don't need to see. I want to eat. Oh, he jumped off his ride and ran across the deck and launched himself at Shanks's back. Shanks, how did he know? Jeff asked bewildered. Just remember that Luffy is special yoy. There aren't many people like him who can tell whose presence is whose. Most of us can only tell if someone is there or not, sometimes determining whether they are enemy or ally, Marco explained. Special indeed, Law mused. I still don't understand how he's alive. It seemed like he had a lethal dosage of that sedative. I mean, we did lose him for a good 5 minutes. I'm sorry, Jeff hung his head. He really didn't mean to hurt anyone. Luffy's forgiven you, so don't think about it anymore, Ace said, limping up behind them while guiding Sabo. Let me guess, Sabo grumbled. Lou's running around like he can see just fine. Only if there's nothing to trip over, Law grinned. What did you run into? Everything and everyone, Sabo sighed. Ran into Yasop on the way out of the bathroom. Stupid Ace did nothing to help. You know yoy, Marco said, this is a good chance to practice your observation haki. You can get a small glimpse of how Luffy sees the world yoy. Yeah, but his doesn't turn off, and it's tiring, Sabo whined like Luffy would. Oh, Ben, Luffy looked at the man over Shanks's shoulder. Ace said you got hurt in one of his prank. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, Ben answered slowly, confused as to how Luffy knew he was there but picked up on the lie Ace set up. It wasn't too bad. Okay, good. Let's eat. Jeff said he's going to take us somewhere yummy. Oh, he did he? Shanks grinned at the approaching group. Yeah, so, food. Luffy cheered as he jumped off Shanks's back and grabbed Jeff's hand to pull him to where he remembered the plank was, only to run into a barrel that someone left. The rest followed and watched as Luffy got back up and dragged Jeff down the plank, trip and roll off the plank with Jeff, run across the pier, weave around a few people, and run into the wall of the bar. Luffy just laughed and got back up and used his hands to feel his way to the door and ran inside with Jeff still on the ground, rubbing his sore bottom. I thought I was supposed to lead him, Jeff said as they arrived. He's hungry, Ace laughed. So he followed his nose. And this happens to be the closest food place. They went in to see Luffy sitting at the bar, waiting for his food. There were only a few other people sitting around at various tables enjoying their breakfast. What did you order, kid? Shanks asked, sitting next to Luffy. Anything. Then we will too, Shanks told the barmaid behind the counter. Anything you have is fine, miss. I hope you have a lot of food. 3 of these brats eat enough for 10 grown men, he laughed. Sabo laid his head on the counter in the seat on Luffy's other side. Lou, how do you do it? Do what? How do you walk around with your observation hacky on all the time? It's so tiring. And how can you tell who is who? I don't know. How do I turn it off? Ugh. Luffy laughed at him before he asked. I see lights. Some are brighter than others. All the lights feel different. Ace and Sabo's light are super bright, except when we play hide and seek. Then it's not as bright. They all listened as they had wanted to know also. I don't see anything. I just feel that something is there or if it's coming towards me, Sabo grumbled. Why is this so hard? Normally, that's about right, Yoi, Marco said to Sabo. From what I've learned from everyone else, you usually sense that something is there. Once you get used to that, you'll eventually sense if something is coming towards you and whether it's coming with ill intention or not. The 3 of you have gotten better at dodging attacks. So you're improving, Yoi. Food came and they ate. A few minutes later, a woman came and took a seat at a table near the door. Luffy paused in his eating for a moment, before he picked up his plate to sit with the lady without a word to them. The others continued eating but kept an eye on the boy who started chatting with the woman. They watched as the woman stared at the strange little boy in bewilderment as he started talking. Then she gave him a small warm smile, which Luffy returned brightly, and she started talking with the boy. After he finished talking, he came back to them, leaving his empty plate with the lone woman. What was that about? Ace asked. Luffy just hummed questioningly. Why did you go to talk to that lady? Oh, she was sad, so I went to talk to her. She said she didn't know what to do with her baby because she don't like the man that gave her the baby. So I told her that people shouldn't be judged by their blood. That's what Grandpop says, right? Babies don't do bad things. She has to teach the baby good things. Luffy started on his next plate that was set in front of him. Like me, right? Ace and Sabo taught me lots of good things. You are full of surprises, brat. Shanks ruffled Luffy's hair fondly. Really? He tilted head. Yes, you are. How did you know what that lady needed? Shanks leaned his head into his hand with his elbow resting on the counter. Sounds like she was crying. She was sad, and I asked her why she was sad. She asked what she should do with a monster's child or something like that. I told her babies are not monsters. Monsters are the big scaring things. And babies are small and cute, so not monsters. She wasn't crying, Yoi, Marco said, concern clear in his eyes. Maybe you need to get your ears checked, Luffy shrugged, causing the rest of them question the boy's hearing. They all knew for certain the woman wasn't crying. Her face had been dry since she came in, though they could tell she was upset about something. But now she seemed satisfied with the world. And here I thought he was some happy-go-lucky idiot, Ben laughed. He is, law, Ace, and Sabo said. He has his moments, Yoi, Marco said fondly. I think this is what Queen Ottoheim was talking about, being able to hear people's heart, Yoi. The barmaid came by once again with another plate for the 3 black holes. Thank you, she said softly to Luffy. I don't know what you said to her, but she seems happier. You a friend of hers? Shanks asked. Everyone here are friends, especially after you brought us here together, she laughed. We talk a lot. I guess we're good friends. She's been down ever since finding out she was pregnant with a noble's child. She didn't know whether she should keep it or not. And if she kept it, she worried that he or she would be treated like a monster because of its unknown father. She looked to her friend worriedly. We are all children of the sea. Grandpop said that to us, Ace said quietly. Bloodline means nothing. We're our own person. I'll be sure to tell her that, the kind barmaid said, and the others. She's not the only one, you know. I'm not surprised, Marco said. Life as a slave is harsh, Yoi. Yeah, Sabo said sadly. You can't fight back. Even when you know you can easily overpower them strength-wise. The master finds your weakness and holds it against you. But you're all free now, Ace smiled for her. That's all that matters. After spending the whole day with the pirates, Jeff wasn't sure what to think of Luffy. The teen would bounce here and there, run into things, constantly ask for food, and say very strange and childish things. Was he really older than him? Is this person really 13? Even worse is when his brothers seem to just let him do whatever the kid wants and buys whatever he wants. You guys are spoiling him, Jeff commented to Ace. That's because he's our sunshine. He shines bright even in a dark cell. As long as he smiles, we know everything is good. He's the reason me and Sabo found a will to live again. Ace said before walking towards a cotton candy vendor. Jeff looked at him in confusion when Marco walked up and placed a hand on his shoulder. What's with the face, kid yoy? Luffy, he's weird. He acts like a kid but sometimes says adult things. Ace, Sabo, and Law just indulge him. You've heard Ace and Sabo's story. Can you imagine having to raise a toddler at their young age, yoy? I think they did a great job under their circumstance. They've raised him to live his life the fullest, to live his life with no regrets. You should do the same, yoy. Marco gave him a smile. Just so you know, those three aren't the only ones that spoils him rotten. He lives on a ship with over 1,000 siblings who fell in love with his bright attitude towards life, and yet he's still selfless, yoy. It's been 5 years, and he still blames himself for Shanks's arm. What happened to Shanks's arm? Jess asked in surprised curiosity. It was something a lot of the people on the island has been wondering about but never asked. Luffy was kidnapped by someone we trusted. Marco hissed the last word and then tossed into the sea. This was right after the three of them ate their devil fruit, so he couldn't swim. I don't think he was ever taught to swim, now that I think about it. A sea king was about to eat him, but Shanks gave up his arm in order to save him, yoy. They were interrupted by Sabo's cheer inside a bookstore. I can see. They could hear him from the streets. They went in to see him lifting Luffy in the air and spinning him around. The two outside looked at each other and smiled. Jeff now understands, or as much as his young mind could, and decided that he wants to be like them. To live life without regret. Later that evening, Ace and Sabo asked if they could spend the night in the forest for old time's sake. While Law, Ace, Sabo, Luffy, and Jeff trekked through the dark forest with their oil lantern, Ace and Sabo told stories of when they lived with Daten and about their treehouse they never got to finish. Eventually, Luffy asked Jeff what his childhood was like. My hometown was on a small island in South Blue. I was an only child and lived with both of my parents. Every day was fun, even though I had to help out in the fields. There were times when I snuck out on my chores to play with the other kids, he said with a fond smile before it turned into a frown. I'm not sure what happened, but one night, this guy came and took me from my room. I remember yelling for help and my parents coming out of their room, but the guy killed them. This was 2 years ago. Shanks offered to take me back, but I don't think I can live there without remembering what happened. Right now, I'm staying with this really nice old lady who took care of me while I was a slave with her. Luffy just hummed, thoughts miles away. What about Trow? I'm from North Blue. I had a younger sister. We both wanted to be doctors like our parents. I'd like to think I had a very normal childhood. I went to school, had friends to talk and play with even though I wasn't very sociable. Law shrugged. Ace and Sabo purposefully tripped Jeff before he could open his mouth to ask Luffy about his childhood. Why are you asking? You've never been interested before, Law asked, distracting Luffy from Jeff's fall. Luffy looked up at him in surprise before giving a blinding smile. Just wondering, he sang before running ahead of the group, laughing as he swung from one branch to the next. Hey, wait, Law shouted with his arm reaching out to stop Luffy, only to realize Luffy hadn't tripped over anything since they've left Marco. When did he get his sight back? He asked the three behind him, who only shrugged in confusion before they all ran after Luffy. When the pirates boarded their ship to go back home the next day after lunch, Jeff stopped Luffy from following the rest of the crew up the ship. There was something he wanted to say. After a whole day of observing and spending time with Luffy, Jeff has come to a realization. I really admire you. You always seem so happy, and I just want to say that I'm going to try to live like you. To live without regrets, Luffy answered with a smile. That's how you should. Never regret anything you choose to do. That's why I forgive you for saving Ace. You are a good person. Oh, yeah. He took out a piece of paper and tore a piece to give to him. When you can sail on your own, follow this paper. I think you'd like the people there. Just tell them I sent you. Oh, but you'll have to train to get stronger though, or maybe they want smart people. Whatever. They'll like you because you're a good person, and you want to help. Also, Jeff looked up at the pirates waiting for Luffy on the ship and back to Luffy, his face a little red. I think I like you, and I hope I can see you again, he said quickly. He gave Luffy a peck on the cheek before taking off. Hearing the cheers, whistles, and curses behind him, Luffy looked up at his friends and family in confusion. Marco had to hold Ace and Sabo back from jumping ship and roasting the kid, even though he wants to do the same. Law, on the other hand, was glaring in the direction that Jeff took. Seems you got yourself a crush, kid, Shanks said as Luffy walked up the plank. I didn't crush anything. The young teen tilted his head in confusion. Luffy, Ace said seriously. You are not allowed near that asshole ever again. Huh, who? Never mind that, Law interrupted. Luffy, if anyone ever asks you to marry them, say no. You are not allowed to get married until we say you can. Got it? Why? Because I say so. Now promise me that you'll say no if anyone ever asks you to marry them. Okay, good thinking, yoy, Marco sighed in relief. At least he doesn't have to worry about the most troublesome of his four getting married without his consent. And no boyfriend or girlfriend, yoy. What's that? Marco and the three teens sighed in frustration and went on to attempt to persuade their youngest to never date anyone as the rest of the red hair pirates laugh at their overprotectiveness. And if anyone touches you funny, let me know. I'll rip his family jewels off and burn it right in front of him, Ace said dangerously. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.